Hello, my brothers. I've just launched 3 new channels, and I'd really appreciate your support in helping each of them reach 1,000 subscribers. I'll be uploading even more exciting new series on these channels, so if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing and supporting them. Thank you all so much for your support. It truly means a lot to me. This news left many people quite confused. Except for a few, no one understood why Xia Chan, an outstanding and capable leader, would suddenly step down. After Lin Tian took over, he kicked out all the parasites relying on the base. He showed no mercy even to the fools, slaughtering them without hesitation. A high-level purge began within the base. Many senior officials were dragged down, making way for younger, more dynamic individuals. Lin Tian's ruthless methods left the base's management in a state of panic. Previously, when Xia Chun was the leader, many secretly disobeyed or were dissatisfied with him, thinking that despite his competence, he lacked decisiveness in critical moments. But when Lin Tian took power, they finally realized that Xia Chun was the most reasonable leader they could have asked for. Many still wanted to find Xia Chun and persuade him to return to his position as leader. But no one knew that Xia Chun had quietly left the base and gone to the Lin family base. In the inner courtyard of the Lin family base, Xia Chun sat opposite Lin Shi, watching him meditate. Unable to ignore Xia Chun's burning gaze, Lin Shi opened his eyes and said, "Leader Xia, if you have nothing to do, go find some work. I've already swept the yard, bathed Ma Wang and Xiao Bai, and corrected Xiaoxi's homework. There's really nothing left to do." Xia Chun replied seriously. Ma Wang, freshly bathed by Xia Chun and still smelling faintly of body wash, Ma Wang raised its head and puffed out its chest in response. Lin Shi helplessly rubbed his forehead. Ever since Lin Shi left the government base and told Xia Chun to think it over carefully, Xia Chun quickly handed over his work to Lin Tianrui and the others, then came to the Lin family base. He asked Lin Shi to take him to the Sanlian continent, but Lin Shi asked the treasure basin, and there was currently no way to help Xia Chun. To increase the success rate of reverse teleportation, the treasure basin needed to devour at least one intermediate level or higher vessel. As for Xia Chun's vessel, because it was highly compatible with him and needed to protect its master's consciousness during the teleportation process, the treasure basin couldn't devour it. Furthermore, if conditions permitted, Xia Chun's vessel should be upgraded. Therefore, their only option was to wait for the Sanlian continent to provide more vessels. In the following days, Xia Chun stayed at the Lin family base. Aside from helping Lin Shi with some chores in the inner courtyard, he basically followed Lin Shi wherever he went. According to Xia Chun, he was learning the demeanor of a powerhouse from Lin Shi. In reality, Lin Shi felt that Xia Chun was using this method to show his determination to go to the Sanlian continent. As for the government base, although Xia Chun still held the title of deputy leader, his duties had been completely handed over to Lin Tianrui and Wang Chao. Xia Chun's only mission now was to be ready to head to the Sanlian continent at any moment. "Leader Xia, can you tell me why I always get the feeling that you have no lingering attachments to this world?" Lin Shi asked straightforwardly, not beating around the bush, just chatting to kill time with Xia Chun. Xia Chun froze, then smiled faintly. "To tell you the truth, Patriarch Lin, just calling me by my name is fine. It's nothing worth mentioning. Do you really want to hear it?" Lin Shi nodded. Xia Chun blinked, paused for a moment, and then said, "Patriarch Lin, if my parents were heinous criminals, would you still think I'm a good person?" Lin Shi frowned. "What do your parents have to do with you? You are you, and your parents are your parents. If you grew up with criminal parents, you might be influenced, but that doesn't prove anything. Besides, if I remember correctly, your file says you are a descendant of the Xia family in the capital. Your father was a soldier with many illustrious military achievements." Lin Shi had read Xia Chun's file at the leader's training camp, so he remembered it very clearly. Xia Chun shook his head slightly. "Actually, the man you're talking about is my adoptive father. I'm not a child of the Xia family. I've never told anyone about this. My true identity is the child of a couple who spent years mingling in the dark underworld. During an extermination mission, my adoptive father killed my parents, then brought me back to the Xia family, claiming I was his biological son. Only my adoptive father and I know about this. You are the third person, Patriarch Lin." Xia Chun seemed to be lifting a heavy boulder that had been weighing on his heart for a long time. The more he spoke, the more he said, and the faster he talked. Hearing this, Lin Shi thought Xia Chun was so determined to go to the Sanlian continent because he had no blood relatives left. He thought for a moment and said, "If you grew up in the Xia family, then your parents' sins have even less to do with you. Even without your parents, you still have friends, colleagues, and comrades in arms, right?" Xia Chun sighed, his gaze seemingly drifting far away. "But since I was young, my adoptive father told me that I was the child of heinous criminals. I lived to atone for their sins, to repay the crimes my biological parents committed. I have to use my actions to prove that the blood of evil doesn't flow in my veins." Lin Shi was stunned once again. What the hell is this? He couldn't help but curse. "You were just a child back then. What do your parents' actions have to do with you?" Xia Chun closed his eyes and said, "Growing up, my adoptive father always told me that. He told me to keep this secret forever and never tell anyone. At that time, I was already a role model for my peers in the Xia family, a recognized genius. I was terrified that if my true identity was exposed, I would be isolated and despised, so I never dared to tell anyone. But the longer I kept this secret, the deeper it rooted itself in my heart. I didn't even dare to sleep deeply, afraid that one day I would talk about it in my sleep. I was afraid they would find out that the Xia family's genius, their role model, had filthy blood running through his veins. From then on, I lived every day in anxiety, fear, guilt, self-blame, and self-doubt. Even right before my adoptive father passed away, he held my hand and reminded me, telling me that I absolutely had to atone for my parents' sins." Lin Shi was dumbfounded. What kind of twisted upbringing was this? To teach a pure-hearted child from a young age that he was the son of sinners, making him live in fear and anxiety, constantly striving just to atone. Wasn't that too cruel? Now, Lin Shi believed Xia Chun's words that the man who raised him was his adoptive father. Because if he were his biological father, he absolutely wouldn't have done something so insane. Is it possible that your adoptive father lied to you? Lin Shi voiced his speculation. Xia Chun smiled bitterly. "After I gained some power, I investigated it myself. During that final mission years ago, my adoptive father did indeed kill a couple carrying a newborn baby. Also, my adoptive father and I share no blood relation." Lin Shi didn't know what to say. Even if Xia Chun really was the child of heinous, vicious criminals, he was just a newborn baby at the time. What crime could he possibly have committed? In Lin Shi's eyes, the actions of Xia Chun's adoptive father were incredibly extreme and unimaginable. Xia Chun grew up in an environment of constant fear, self-doubt, and self-denial. How much pain and torment had he endured? Yet, he still grew up to be the humble, gentle, and polite person he was today. No, perhaps it was exactly because Xia Chun was always humble and polite, never losing his temper or taking a life carelessly, that made people pity him even more. Was he afraid that if he got angry, if he used his power to kill, he wouldn't be able to help but remember his biological parents' heinous crimes and the words his adoptive father constantly whispered in his ear all those years? Therefore, Xia Chun's attitude all this time was to prove to everyone that he wasn't an evil person. Thinking of this, Lin Shi couldn't help but feel sympathy for Xia Chun. Was everything he did just to atone for those sins? Xia Chun lowered his head in silence, gently pushing up the glasses on the bridge of his nose, seemingly trying to hide the turmoil in his heart. But an indescribable trace of confusion still flickered in his eyes. Xia Chun just said softly, "I love my country, I love this land." Xia Chun raised his head, his gaze fixed on Lin Shi. "If I go to the Sanlian continent, no matter the outcome, I can consider my mission accomplished, right?" Lin Shi didn't know how to answer, because he saw a glimmer of relief and liberation in Xia Chun's eyes. Had Xia Chun always been waiting for an opportunity to sacrifice himself for a mission? Recalling the previous apocalypse before the reversal of time, Xia Chun wasn't there. Lin Shi felt he finally understood why. In the previous apocalypse, Xia Chun didn't go south to the Shushi base with Xia Guohuang and the others. Because his adoptive father had taught him from a young age that he lived only to atone, causing Xia Chun to lose himself early on in an inferiority complex and guilt. If he couldn't escape that cage and had to continue living so suffocatingly, then indeed, death would be a release. Initially, through his interactions with Xia Chun, Lin Shi had grown increasingly fond of him. He had planned to persuade him to give up the idea of going to the Sanlian continent. But now, those words of advice couldn't be spoken. Right, Lin Shi said. A smart person like Xia Chun suddenly telling Lin Shi this traumatic story was definitely not without reason. In fact, revealing his background was also part of Xia Chun's plan. He wanted Lin Shi to give up on persuading him not to go to the Sanlian continent. Lin Shi sighed inwardly. The two fell into silence. Just as Lin Shi was about to find a lighter topic to chat with Xia Chun, a red subtitle suddenly appeared on the Treasure Basin's interface. Hurry! 2,301 kilometers to the southeast. Vessel fluctuations detected. Lin Shi jumped up in shock. A vessel has been found. Hearing this, Xia Chun immediately said, I'll go with you. Lin Shi glanced at Xia Chun and didn't say much. Time was of the essence, and they couldn't afford to delay. He focused his spiritual power, lifting Xia Chun in an instant, and they dashed toward the southeast together. While flying at high speed, Lin Shi continuously communicated with the treasure basin to pinpoint the exact location. Which country's territory is the exact location in? How many vessels were detected this time? The exact location is within the territory of the Wei nation. Based on the energy fluctuations from last time, at least 2 intermediate-level vessels have appeared this time, and there might even be a high-level vessel. Patriarch Lin, do you know the exact location where the vessels appeared? Xia Chun asked anxiously. In the Wei nation. I remember after the apocalypse, because the Wei nation deployed most of its soldiers to invade the Xia nation, a lot of their people died in the early stages, right? Leader Xia, do you know what the current situation is like over there? Lin Shi answered Xia Chun while asking about the Wei nation's current state. I'm quite clear on that. Actually, at that time, the high-ranking officials of the Wei nation completely lost control of the populace. They couldn't even establish a safe base for themselves. If it weren't for the survivors of the Xiong nation in the north migrating south to the Wei nation, establishing a base, and taking in a small number of Wei nation citizens, the Wei nation would have already become a desolate wasteland with no signs of life. The Xiong nation. Lin Shi recalled the information about this country. This was a nation known as the Warrior Nation, and it had always maintained good relations with the Xia nation. Xia Chun continued, Our country and the Xiong nation have always maintained a good cooperative relationship. Even after the apocalypse, this relationship continued. The president of the Xiong nation listened to the Xia nation leaders' suggestions before the apocalypse, so they were fully prepared. Their level of preparation was only one step behind ours. However, due to their disadvantageous geographical location, they had to relocate some of their elderly and weak to the Wei nation. In short, based on the current situation, that area of the Wei nation now belongs to the Xiong nation's territory. I understand. When it's time to find the vessels, I'll need your help. It's what I should do. I've already contacted the president of the Xiong nation. I'll let him know in advance. Lin Shi used his spiritual power to block the strong winds, so Xia Chun's use of the communicator wasn't affected. A few minutes ago, at the border of the Wei nation, near the Xiong nation base, a special task force was working quietly. This team consisted of former Wei nation citizens. Their daily task was clearing snow. The team members were of all ages. There were 2 50-year-old men, weathered by life, a couple in their 30s, and 4 energetic teenagers. But now, they were working for the Xiong nation base on their own land. With grueling, dirty work and meager pay, the snow piled up on the roads like mountains. For various reasons, their homeland couldn't establish its own base. The small houses, originally built to withstand earthquakes, were now mostly buried deep under the prolonged blizzard. These homeless people had no other choice but to humbly beg for the Xiong nation's protection to find a way to survive. The harsh life had forged them to be incredibly resilient, but the helplessness and humiliation deep in their hearts could never be erased. Faced with their current plight, they could only accept it, using their own hands to struggle for survival. Every shovel of snow held their hope for the future, no matter how slim that hope was. Just as they were busy shoveling snow, a teenage girl in the team suddenly cried out, kneeling down to pick up a sparkling object under the sunlight. What is this? The object in the girl's hand was a hairpin with a unique design, adorned with vibrant roses. Igong, is that a hairpin? It's so cute. Another girl saw the hairpin in Xiao Chunaigong's hand, her eyes lighting up. Hurry, try it on. Okay. Xiao Chunaigong hurriedly pinned the hairpin to her hair. Instantly, Xiao Chunaigong's eyes changed. The others hadn't noticed anything unusual about Xiao Chunaigong yet. The girl who had just cried out was still excitedly praising her. Igong, you look absolutely adorable wearing this hairpin. The two teenage boys next to them also smiled and chimed in. The middle-aged couple, however, was displeased seeing the kids stop working over a hairpin. The middle-aged woman shouted in dissatisfaction. What are you doing? Get back to work. How long are you going to slack off? If you don't focus, we won't finish clearing this section of the road by tonight. Her husband chimed in as well. His gaze swept over Xiao Chunaigong and the other girl, his eyes clearly revealing a despicable and greedy look. The girl who had cried out muttered, "Got it," then picked up her shovel and resumed working. Only Xiao Chunaigong stood frozen in place. Seeing this, the middle-aged man sneaked a glance at his wife, then glared at the dazed Xiao Chunaigong. He walked over, raising his hand to slap Xiao Chunaigong's face. Hey, didn't you hear her tell you not to slack off? Thwack! A heavy sound of metal-piercing flesh rang out in the air. The sound was drowned out by the noisy shoveling of snow, and hardly anyone noticed. But when fresh blood splattered across the white snow, the glaring red color made everyone jump in shock. An old man in the team accidentally looked down and saw the bloodstains at his feet. His heart pounded wildly. He turned around in shock, and the sight before him terrified him to his core. The snow shovel that should have been in the man's hands was now in Xiao Chunaigong's hands, and the sharp blade had pierced right through the middle-aged man. Time seemed to stop. The old man's eyes widened, his jaw dropping, unable to believe his eyes. He stared blankly at the bloody scene, his body trembling uncontrollably. The others also noticed the anomaly, stopped what they were doing, and stared in shock at what was unfolding. The middle-aged woman in the team screamed in terror. Just a moment ago, she was praising Xiao Chunaigong for being cute. Now she shrieked and stumbled back several steps. Hey, Igong, what are you doing? What kind of name is this? It sounds annoying to death. Xiao Chunaigong frowned, an expression of annoyance far beyond her years appearing on her face. She let go, and the middle-aged man's heavy body fell to the snowy ground along with the shovel with a loud thud. Seeing Xiao Chunaigong standing there empty-handed, the middle-aged woman's anger surged. Go to hell. She gripped her snow shovel tightly and lunged at Xiao Chunaigong with all her might. But right at that moment, a few figures flashed. Xiao Chunaigong seemed to vanish into thin air, then reappeared behind the middle-aged woman. She was as agile as a ghost, tightly grabbing the woman's thick coat. With only a groan, the middle-aged woman was slammed into the ground by a powerful force. A few seconds later, time seemed to freeze. The middle-aged woman's body was twisted grotesquely, lying motionless on the cold snow. All signs of life had completely vanished. Only then did the others wake up from their nightmare, realizing the severity of the situation, and frantically scattered in panic. Run! Igong must be possessed by an evil spirit. The three teenagers who usually hung out with Xiao Chunaigong were the first to run. A girl who was originally kind, strong, and pure had changed her temperament in an instant. She had become cold, ruthless, and killed without batting an eye. This sudden turn of events couldn't be explained by common sense. In reality, Xiao Chunaigong had been possessed by a powerful consciousness from the Sanlian continent. Xiao Chunaigong grabbed a teenage boy by the collar, holding him tight. The captured boy trembled in fear, losing all courage to run. He collapsed to the ground, begging for mercy. Don't! Igong, please don't kill me. Xiao Chunaigong ignored the boy and spoke to the empty air. Shui Wei, go deal with those escapees. Following that cold command, the Shui Wei on the girl's hairpin turned blood red. Several silk-like red hairs shot out from the hairpin. In the blink of an eye, they pierced the foreheads of the fleeing people, then returned to the hairpin. The act of killing didn't leave the slightest expression on Xiao Chunaigong's face. She looked around, found a rough hairpin in the snow, and a look of disgust flashed in her eyes. She turned back to the boy she had held back. Ignoring his pleas for mercy and screams, she ruthlessly stabbed the hairpin into his chest. Very quickly, the boy's eyes clouded over, then became as calm as water. Xiao Chunaigong said in annoyance, "Idiot! You couldn't even pick a good spot to land. It's all because Lord Ji Shui chose such a good location that drew all their attention. The boy smiled bitterly, stood up from the snow, and brushed off the dirt he had just struggled to escape from. It turned out that the consciousness that replaced Xiao Chunaigong was Ji Shui. And inside the boy's body was now the consciousness of an adult from the Sanlian continent. The boy looked around and said somewhat anxiously, "Previously, almost all the groups teleported here failed their missions. It's highly likely the other side has some way to track the vessels. It's too dangerous for us to stay here. Are you comparing me to those idiots?" The girl's face showed clear displeasure. The boy waved his hands repeatedly. "That motley crew naturally can't compare to you, captain of the Federation's General Bureau Combat Team. It's good that you know that. According to the information Shui Yu and Qi Sheng sent back before they died, there must be some very powerful people on this planet. But the landing spot we chose is far from their living areas. As long as we don't expose ourselves, they won't be able to find us in the short term," Ji Shui said confidently. "So what do we do next?" the boy asked. Ji Shui said, "First, activate the collector. My main mission this time is to bring the Federation's latest energy collection device here and activate it. Once the collector is activated, if it's destroyed midway or forced to stop absorbing energy, it will explode." The boy nodded. When the collector is active, the life energy of living creatures and the energy in the air within a certain radius will be completely absorbed. We have to get far away from the collector to grow stronger. Of course, my spiritual power has been at level 8 for a long time. This time, I came to this world to become even stronger. Ji Shui's thoughts shifted rapidly. A nearly imperceptible flash of light suddenly gleamed from the exquisite hairpin in her hair. In an instant, a terrifyingly massive object appeared where there was previously nothing. It was a cylindrical object, its entire body radiating a cold silver light, brimming with a futuristic sci-fi aesthetic. Both ends were sharply pointed, and its surface was engraved with dense, complex, and mysterious patterns. Ji Shui gently raised her jade-like hand, her slender fingers lightly tracing the intricate patterns on the collector's surface. Every touch seemed to carry a strange magic, causing these patterns to emit a blinding light one after another. When her finger left the final rune, the entire collector suddenly burst with an incredibly dazzling light. Immediately after, amidst violent tremors, it shot straight into the sky like a rocket, finally hovering steadily in midair. When the collector came to a halt, its massive, cold body exuded an invisible pressure. An indescribable suction force, like a raging torrent, centered on this behemoth and swept in all directions. Yet, the surrounding air remained completely unaffected. If someone used an elemental matter measuring device to scan the area around the collector, they would find it frantically absorbing the energy and matter in the air. Even Ji Shui, standing below, felt the energy in her body rapidly depleting. That energy wasn't just the origin power and matter in her body, but also included her life energy. The moment the collector activated, all the mutated beasts around the island nation began to riot, frantically fleeing the island. The animal survival instincts kicked in at this moment. They knew that if they didn't run, they would likely die. And at the base over 10 kilometers away, outside the Xiong nation, quite a few people clearly saw the collector rise into the air. "Yes, sir. Hey, what is that in the sky? An alien machine. Didn't the base invent some new machine? Forget it. Ignore it. Keep working. Let the base management handle it." Many people frowned, doubt clearly written on their faces, but few paid it much mind. After all, the two locations were far apart. If one didn't pay close attention, it was hard to notice the energy in their bodies gradually depleting by the minute. However, some people still felt incredibly exhausted from work today, as if they were carrying a 1,000-pound weight on their shoulders. Ji Shui stared at the energy collection device in the sky. Waiting until she was sure it was operational, she turned to instruct the boy beside her. "We can't stay here long. We must leave immediately. Being this close, if we stay any longer, we'll be exhausted and lose our ability to move before tomorrow even comes." The boy nodded respectfully. "Understood, Lord Ji Shui. Where do we go next?" "We?" Ji Shui sneered. "I'm going back to the nearby base to find transportation. As for you, walk out of this area on foot. Don't come with me." "Achoo. It's freezing to death." Ji Shui sneezed, then continued. Use the vessel to absorb more origin matter. Try to complete your evolution early. You'll have a better chance of surviving. Ji Shui said with certainty, not hesitating in the slightest to use her comrade as bait. After speaking, she packed the corpses and bloodstains on the ground into her vessel. Understood, Lord Ji Shui, the boy replied. Then the two separated, heading in different directions. A moment later, Lin Shi quietly arrived in the airspace of the island nation. As soon as he entered the island nation's airspace, his powerful spiritual power quickly detected the mysterious energy collection device hovering in the sky. What is that? Lin Shi exclaimed in surprise. Xia Chun, beside him, hadn't reached that device with his spiritual power yet. Seeing Lin Shi's expression change, he asked suspiciously, What's wrong, Patriarch Lin? I found something. More accurately, something that doesn't belong to this world. Lin Shi quickly flew toward the strange object. Before he even got close, Lin Shi felt the origin power in his body depleting abnormally. He stopped and turned to ask Xia Chun, Do you feel anything? Xia Chun was stunned. Knowing Lin Shi wasn't joking, he focused his senses with a serious expression. A moment later, Xia Chun said, The origin power in my body seems to be draining rapidly. It seems I'm not hallucinating. Right now, Lin Shi was controlling their flight, so consuming origin power was normal. But Xia Chun was just sitting still, so he felt it much more clearly. Lin Shi continued advancing toward the energy collection device. When they were a few dozen kilometers away, Lin Shi was absolutely certain that the origin power in his body was draining. That is, Xia Chun had also spotted the energy collection device. With Xia Chun's intelligence, he immediately guessed what it was. The Sanlian continent's new energy collection device. Xia Chun and Lin Shi looked at each other. Both of their eyes showed a grave expression, as well as anger. What do we do now, Patriarch Lin? Xia Chun looked worried. Don't panic. Let's get closer and observe the situation first. Lin Shi reassured him, but in reality, he wasn't entirely sure himself. He noticed that the location the treasure basin indicated for the vessel was right below that energy collection object hovering in the sky. The closer they got to the object, the faster the origin power in Lin Shi and Xia Chun's bodies dissipated. No, to be precise, it's not being consumed, it's being sucked away. Lin Shi immediately decided to stop. At this point, the distance between them and the energy collection object had shortened to less than a kilometer. Lin Shi felt that not only his origin power, but also his life force was being drained. Don't get any closer. That thing is probably a new type of energy collection device from the Sanlian continent. It can suck away all the energy within a certain range. Lin Shi relayed the treasure basin's words to Xia Chun. Patriarch Lin, can your space take that thing in? I'll try, Lin Shi replied. But a second later, the treasure basin responded. This object cannot be brought into the space. It will explode. Its structure is highly unstable and is currently in a state of equilibrium. If broken, it will cause an explosion, and the power is not small. Troublesome. Lin Shi glanced down. Below the energy collection object, a large group of soldiers and high-ranking officials of the Xiong nation were gathering. These people looked tense, staring at the object hovering in the sky. Faced with this mystery-filled thing, humanity's instinctive fear of the unknown was magnified infinitely, especially since they felt their bodies growing increasingly exhausted. Those soldiers were setting up anti-aircraft weapons, intending to shoot down the object in the sky. Lin Shi's eye sharpened. With a mere thought, the heavy weapons that the Xiong nation base had prepared below instantly vanished without a trace. The sudden turn of events threw the people below into chaos and uproar. Lin Shi looked at Xia Chun's surprised expression and explained, If that thing is hit, it will explode, and the power is massive. I confiscated their weapons first to avoid unnecessary trouble. Hearing this, Xia Chun's expression turned grave, realizing the severity of the situation. He nodded slightly, indicating he understood Lin Shi's intention, and said, I understand. Thanks for the warning. But doing this will definitely panic the people below. How about I go down and explain the situation to them? Lin Shi shifted his thoughts, and together with Xia Chun, slowly descended from the sky. When they appeared before everyone, some tense soldiers immediately raised their weapons, staring warily at the two. But in the crowd, A few high-ranking leaders of the Xiong Nation base quickly recognized Xia Chun. They immediately shouted to calm the agitated soldiers. "Stand down. They are our esteemed guests." Those high-ranking officials quickly approached Xia Chun and said anxiously, "Leader Xia, you've come at a bad time. A strange device suddenly appeared around our base, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with it. Look at that strange object in the sky." And our weapons vanished in the blink of an eye. Xia Chun hurriedly stepped forward to explain, "Everyone, this is an energy collection device from another world. If attacked, it will explode with devastating force. The Xia Nation government has known about the apocalypse and the origin pillars since before the apocalypse occurred." Xia Chun said the object in the sky was an energy collection device and that attacking it would cause an explosion. The people in the Xiong Nation base immediately believed him. "Are we just going to leave it hanging in the sky? I feel like my life force is being drained. Leader Xia, do you have any solutions? Can you help us?" The high-ranking officials of the Xiong Nation base asked anxiously. Who wouldn't be worried when a bomb that could explode at any moment appeared right at their doorstep, and it was sucking away their energy to boot? "Don't worry, we will definitely help you solve this problem. For now, we should leave this area first," Xia Chun reassured them. Lin Shi observed the soldiers and high-ranking officials, examining the items they carried. Vessels could conceal spiritual senses, unless he saw the vessel on them. Lin Shi couldn't possibly sense its location. However, Lin Shi wasn't worried that the vessel would run away. They had arrived very quickly, and Lin Shi's spiritual power had already covered the entire island nation. Currently, he hadn't detected anyone moving rapidly off the island. This proved that the vessel was definitely still on this island nation. Currently, the population of the Xiong Nation base on this island was over 50 million, but the vessel had just landed outside the base. In other words, the people who had just been active outside the base were his targets. At this point, Lin Shi only needed Xia Chun to coordinate well with the Xiong Nation base and have them check the people who were just outside. Okay. We'll head back first then. The longer I stay, the more I feel my body getting weaker, the high-ranking officials said. Xia Chun and Lin Shi exchanged a glance. Xia Chun understood what Lin Shi wanted to do and said to everyone, "Everyone, we came here because we discovered that someone from the Sonlian continent used something to infiltrate humanity. The energy collection device in the sky was brought by them. Now, please cooperate with us and take out all the items on your person." The soldiers and high-ranking officials of the Xiong Nation were very cooperative, mainly because the relationship between the Xia Nation and the Xiong Nation had always been very good. Xia Chun and Lin Shi appearing at the same time as the energy collection device in the sky proved that the two really came for that device. How could they not cooperate? Those soldiers practically stripped naked without feeling any shame. Lin Shi checked all the items on these soldiers and high-ranking officials, but didn't find the vessel. "Next, please return to the base, leaders, and help us investigate the people who just appeared in this area and where they came from. At the same time, gather everyone who is still outside in one place. Let us inspect them." "No problem. We will definitely help you to find these uninvited guests from another world, these threats to all of humanity." The high-ranking officials of the Xiong Nation base immediately agreed and took action. Very quickly, they gathered a large group of people in the open area outside the base. At this moment, even though they were outside the Xiong Nation base, Lin Shi and Xia Chun could still clearly feel the origin power in their bodies depleting at a powerless rate. The two exchanged a glance, their eyes grave, not missing any details. Lin Shi had just flown around the base area to take in the populace and discovered that the energy collection devices area of effect reached tens of millions of people. Even with enough transportation, it would take hours, even dozens of hours, to move them. Moreover, in this base, besides the soldiers and Xiong Nation officials, there were also surviving Wei Nation citizens, mostly the elderly and children. To move everyone would take at least a few days. They had to tell everyone in the Xiong Nation base to leave quickly. Otherwise, in less than a few days, the origin power and life force of everyone in this base would be almost completely drained. However, all these actions had to be based on them finding the vessel and the person whose body was possessed by the Sonlian continent consciousness. Because what truly worried Lin Shi and Xia Chun right now, even making them feel a looming danger, was if the energy collection devices brought by the Somnian Continent consciousness weren't just one. If they placed the device near the government base, the consequences would be unimaginable. Tens of millions of people still had a chance to leave the device's area of effect in a few days. But if over 1 billion people needed to evacuate the base in a few days, how many would die? Thinking of this, Lin Shi looked at the increasingly large crowd gathering, his face filled with worry and unease. His gaze slowly swept over each face, searching for clues. Then he said, "Bring them up one by one. Everyone must remove everything on them. Even their clothes must be completely taken off." In the freezing air, hearing the soldiers relay Lin Shi's orders, the crowd erupted in an uproar. Immediately, people protested. But those who protested were quickly grabbed by sharp-eyed soldiers, slapped, and stripped naked. Lin Shi and Xia Chun inspected every item on them. After the inspection, they quickly returned their belongings. Once the inspection was done, the Xiong Nation soldiers handed them some biscuits. Seeing that the inspected people weren't harmed and even received biscuits for cooperating, the crowd began to comply. Some even feared the biscuits would run out before their turn and pushed and shoved to be inspected first. Lin Shi and Xia Chun quickly finished inspecting one group. Behind them, many soldiers were calling the surrounding survivors to line up and wait their turn. At the same time, the Xiong Nation base realized the connection between the device and the sky and this incident and took it very seriously. They ordered everyone who had returned to the base within the last hour to be brought outside. Among them was Ji Shui, who had just arrived at the Xiong Nation base. Ji Shui never expected that right after returning to the base, before she could even step through the door, soldiers would tell her to go for an inspection. At first, Ji Shui thought the burly soldier wanted to take advantage of her and planned to take her to a secluded spot to kill her. Then she was taken away in a vehicle. The energy collection device was already active. She couldn't stay here any longer. But what she didn't expect was that the soldiers brought her to an open clearing. "What did you bring me here for?" Ji Shui looked around the crowd, not understanding why she was placed with a group of people dressed in rags. However, her gaze was quickly drawn to the two men standing apart at the front. Their aura and attire were completely different from the people around them. Ji Shui was startled, her eyes widening in disbelief as she looked at Lin Shi and Xia Chun. With her powerful spiritual power, she hadn't been able to detect their presence from such a distance. This was unimaginable on the Somnian continent. If someone could evade the detection of her level 8 spiritual power, there were only two possibilities. Either this person had a special vessel that concealed their aura, or they possessed spiritual power equal to or even superior to hers. This shocked Ji Shui to her core. One must know, on the Somnian continent, there were only 5 people with strength equal to hers, and all of them were level 8 spiritual power powerhouses. As for a level 9 spiritual power existence, there was only one in the entire Federation. The person who held absolute power and decided the fate of the Federation. Previously, she thought the place she was coming to was just a desolate wasteland, a place of exile for the descendants of criminals. She believed that with her outstanding strength, as long as she absorbed the special evolutionary energy of this world, she could easily break through in both physique and spiritual power. She absolutely never expected that this world would have a spiritual power powerhouse stronger than her. Gulp. Thanks to her years of combat experience, Ji Shui didn't carelessly deploy a spiritual power scan. Otherwise, she would have likely been discovered. Lin Shi and Xia Chun guessed correctly. Because the spatial passage between the blue planet and the Somnian continent was one way, besides energy, it was difficult to send anything back, including intelligence. Before Shui Yu and Qi Sheng died, they passively transmitted a small fraction of information back, but this information was very brief and incomplete due to losses during transmission. Furthermore, they had already continuously lost several vessels and people without completing the mission. Therefore, this time, the Somnian Continent Federation, after much deliberation and driven by their thirst for the blue planet's origin matter, dispatched Ji Shui, a powerful level 8 spiritual power warrior. To this world, Ji Shui couldn't have imagined that right upon arriving, she would encounter a powerhouse at least on par with her. At this moment, she somewhat regretted coming to this base, but leaving now would be like beating the grass to scare the snake. Ji Shui could only glance at Lin Shi and quickly look away to avoid being detected, blending into the crowd. Soon after, she saw the person who came to this world with her, Kong, also being led back. Kong and Ji Shui made eye contact. Both saw the anxiety in each other's eyes. A high-ranking official of the Xiong Nation base approached Lin Shi and Xia Chun and said, "Honored guests, within an hour, anyone who is outside the base or preparing to leave will be gathered here. Is there anything we can assist with?" "No need. Just bring the soldiers who have entered and exited the base during this time here," Lin Shi replied. The high-ranking official of the Xiong Nation base nodded in agreement. The inspection continued. Since they started with the men, it was soon Kong's turn. Lin Shi stared intently at the teenager. The teenager quickly removed the items on him, then unhesitatingly took off the clothes he was wearing. Lin Shi inspected him thoroughly, but found nothing unusual. Only his gaze lingered on the bloody wound on the teenager's chest. "How did you get this wound?" Kong took a deep breath, trying to keep his expression natural, and replied softly, "I was doing an outdoor mission just now and accidentally got stabbed." After speaking, he even deliberately coughed twice. Xia Chun, standing nearby, glanced at Lin Shi, then turned to Kong and said, "Put your clothes on." Hearing this, Kong breathed a sigh of relief inwardly, but maintained a calm expression, quietly picking up his clothes from the ground, preparing to put them on. Right at that moment, Kong suddenly felt a bone-chilling coldness strike from above his head. A sense of imminent danger washed over him. Without time to think, Kong instinctively mobilized all his spiritual power, instantly using his special ability to dodge the sudden attack. But a split second later, Kong knew things had gone south. Because Lin Shi's attack wasn't aimed at his head at all, and he completely couldn't dodge the attack from the person in front of him. Lin Shi suddenly grabbed the teenager by the neck, while his other hand mercilessly plunged deep into the teenager's already bloody wound. Amidst the terrified screams of the surrounding crowd, Lin Shi pulled out a syringe. This horrifying scene made Ji Shui, who was in the crowd, widen her eyes, her pupils shrinking. When Lin Shi touched the syringe, the treasure basin's interface immediately responded, clearly indicating that the object in his hand was an intermediate-level vessel. He tossed the syringe to Xia Chun. Lin Shi broke the teenager's limbs, lifted him up like a dead dog, and asked, "Did you bring that thing in the sky? What are you planning?" Faced with the question, Kong remained silent. Immediately after, his head slumped powerlessly. Lin Shi noticed the opponent's spiritual power fluctuations preparing for defense, but he didn't expect that this spiritual attack wasn't aimed at him. Instead, the Sanlian continent consciousness possessing the human body chose to use its massive spiritual power to directly obliterate its own consciousness. Lin Shi didn't expect this person to be so decisive. He didn't even utter a word begging for mercy. He was far more resolute than the Sanlian continent consciousnesses he had encountered before. Seeing this, Xia Chun hurriedly asked, "How is he? Could it be is he dead?" "He's dead." Lin Shi casually tossed the corpse to the ground. Seeing Lin Shi ruthlessly murder the teenager, fear surged like a tide in everyone's hearts. But in the crowd, only Ji Shui secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She thought this sudden inspection was over and she could finally relax. But in the next moment, Lin Shi's cold voice echoed across the freezing snowy ground. "Continue the inspection." Despite their dissatisfaction, under the gun barrels of the Xiong Nation base soldiers, these people didn't dare to disobey. Quickly, the inspection of the male survivors was completed. Next were the women. In front of everyone, most of the women took the initiative to take off their clothes, obviously lacking the decisiveness of the men before them. Having just finished inspecting the men, they were now staring at this side with glowing eyes, causing the crowd to fall dead silent for a moment. No woman wanted to be the first to step forward. Right then, Ji Shui voluntarily stepped out of the crowd. She looked at Lin Shi timidly and weakly, saying softly, "My lord, could you let us go somewhere more private for the inspection?" Ji Shui secretly calculated how to make the opponent lower his guard. As long as she seized the opportunity and used her vessel for a surprise attack, she could kill him. This mission would definitely succeed. After all, she firmly believed that someone this powerful was rare in the world. But Ji Shui underestimated Lin Shi's astuteness. The moment this weak girl was brought over by the soldiers, Lin Shi noticed something unusual. The other suspects were anxious and fearful, but only she was very calm at first. It was only when she noticed Lin Shi that she showed unease. Not only that, but earlier in the crowd, the teenager who committed suicide had also glanced at her. Just those traces alone were enough to make Lin Shi suspect that this frail girl likely also came from the Somnian continent. Earlier, the treasure basin had said that this time, at least 2 intermediate-level vessels or 1 high-level vessel were detected. From the moment he obtained the teenager's vessel, Lin Shi guessed he had an accomplice who was very likely still hiding in the crowd. Therefore, Lin Shi didn't immediately use his mind control ability on the teenager, fearing it would bring trouble. Now, Lin Shi's eyes swept over the girl as sharply as an eagle's. A second later, the mind control skill was activated. Ji Shui saw Lin Shi's eyes change. Although mind control was only the ability of an intermediate-level vessel, its strength depended on the user. With Lin Shi's level 9 spiritual power, even if Ji Shui had level 8 spiritual power, she couldn't resist. Sure enough, Ji Shui's eyes only struggled slightly before she was hypnotized by Lin Shi. Because of his experience with the woman who suddenly died at the Shingen base before, Lin Shi became more cautious. This time, he didn't directly ask sensitive questions. Instead, he asked, "You haven't been in this body for long, have you?" "Yes," Ji Shui replied softly. Receiving an affirmative answer, the corners of Lin Shi's mouth twitched slightly, revealing an imperceptible smile. Then, his gaze shifted to the eye-catching hairpin on the girl's head. "Can I take a look at your hairpin?" he asked. Hearing that Lin Shi wanted it, Gu Shui panicked instantly. Her eyes flickered with a desperate struggle, but Lin Shi quickly intensified his charm. Without hesitation, he reached out and took the rose-patterned hairpin. If it were just an ordinary accessory, he wouldn't have cared, but this was different. It was highly likely a high-level vessel. After all, Lin Shi had never seen a vessel so exquisitely crafted. Just as his fingers were about to touch the hairpin, the treasure basin's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him that it was indeed a high-level vessel. Finally found it. Lin Shi held the hairpin in his hand and gave a slight nod to Xia Chun. "I'll leave the rest to you. I'm taking this woman somewhere quieter. As for the others, the chances of them being from the Triple Link continent are low, but it's best to eliminate any risks." Xia Chun realized Lin Shi had found another vessel, and his face showed a mix of shock and joy. Lin Shi took Gu Shui to a secluded spot and spoke directly to the treasure basin. "Upgrade now. Is this enough?" "Yes, but this upgrade will take a bit longer. I promise you, once it's finished, I'll show you my sincerity." The hairpin then vanished into the palm of Lin Shi's hand. Not long after, once Lin Shi stopped using his hypnosis, Gu Shui gradually regained consciousness. But she immediately realized with horror that her vessel was gone. "You used your mental power on me again." Gu Shui could no longer maintain her composure. At the same time, because she had lost her vessel, most of her abilities were difficult to use. Just as Gu Shui was about to use her mental power to launch a desperate attack on Lin Shi, he gave her a cold warning. "If you want to keep your sanity, you'd better not try using your mental power on me." To a first-rank woman who had lost her vessel, Lin Shi didn't even feel like lifting a finger to restrain her. "Now you have 2 choices. First, I'll use my mental power to force the information about the Triple Link continent out of you. Or second, you tell me everything honestly." Gu Shui bit her lip, knowing she had no real choice. "I'll take the second option. A wise move. But I should warn you, your former comrades have already given me plenty of information. If I find out you're lying, I'll crush every bone in your body, throw you into a fire, then skin you alive and pour salt on the wounds. Of course, I'll keep healing you so you don't die." Hearing Lin Shi describe such a brutal punishment, Gu Shui couldn't help but shudder. Lin Shi was right. She had planned to mix lies with the truth to deceive him. This time, she didn't dare lie anymore. She was like a piece of wood on a chopping block, at his mercy. The man before her hadn't killed her yet, which meant she still had value. As long as she stayed alive, there was a chance. What did it matter if she gave up some intel? The space passage was one way. She could never go back anyway. And this terrifying human couldn't go to the Triple Link continent either. Fine then. Without a self-destruct program to stop her, keeping her loyalty until death was pointless. Thinking this, Gu Shui knew what she had to do. She looked at Lin Shi and asked, "What do you want to know? Tell me about that thing in the sky first." It's the latest energy collection device invented by the Federal Scientific Research Institute. It can absorb energy within a hectare. The closer you are to it, the faster the energy drains. We're too close right now. We need to leave quickly. How do I shut it down? Lin Shi frowned, asking seriously. This was a critical issue. If it wasn't resolved, the consequences would be dire. Gu Shui shook her head and replied helplessly that it couldn't be shut down. This collector was designed to be unstoppable. Once activated, it won't stop until it has absorbed all the surrounding energy. Then, it transmits that energy back to the Triple Link Continent's Research Institute headquarters. After that, it self-destructs and becomes scrap on the spot. Hearing this, Lin Shi's eyes turned dangerously cold. He narrowed them, and a thick, killing intent radiated from his body. That killing intent was as powerful as a tide, spreading everywhere. Gu Shui was pushed back a step by the sheer force of it. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and continued. I'm not lying to you. There really is no way to shut down this collector. Even if you used your mental power to control me, the answer would be the same. The Federation sent me on this mission with this new collector specifically to ensure there were no mistakes. Although it stores less than a primordial pillar, it's extremely fast and efficient as a short-term collector. So, Gu Shui's voice grew smaller and smaller. She had never felt such a powerful killing intent from anyone before. It felt like it was about to swallow her whole, terrifying her. She often fought wild beasts outside the safe zones, but her own killing intent wasn't even 1% of what this young man possessed. Gu Shui looked at Lin Shi anxiously. She was the one who brought the collector, and she was the one who started it. Actually, she had another collector in her storage, but now that Lin Shi had taken her vessel, she could no longer sense it. That mobile collector, will it explode? Lin Shi asked with a serious frown. If it's attacked or stopped before it's full, it will cause a massive explosion. Why? Are you planning to move it to a deserted area? Lin Shi gave her a sharp look. Stop asking questions. Gu Shui lowered her head in silence, feeling a bit resentful, though she didn't show it. After all, on the Triple Link Continent, no one had ever dared to speak to her like that. Even the director of the Federal General Bureau treated her with politeness. But now, faced with Lin Shi's blunt attitude, she could only endure. Lin Shi asked again, what's your name? And what's your status on the Triple Link Continent? Hearing him ask so directly about her background, Gu Shui raised her head, her eyes flashing with a hint of pride. My name is Gu Shui. I'm the captain of the 3rd Squad, 3rd War Division, of the Federal General Bureau. Sounds pretty impressive. Of course, in the entire Federation, few would dare provoke someone of my status. Seeing Gu Shui's smug expression, Lin Shi let out a cold laugh and threw a bucket of cold water on her ego. Right now, you're just a prisoner. You. Gu Shui was so angry her chest heaved, but given the situation, no matter how furious she was, she couldn't do anything to him. Lin Shi looked at her coldly. Get a clear understanding of your current situation. I can make your life a living hell at any moment. Now follow me. Don't try anything, or you'll regret the consequences. Gu Shui knew he wasn't joking. She had already felt the terrifying power coming from this man who didn't look very old. By the time Lin Shi led Gu Shui back, Xia Chun had finished checking the others. Since they were all women, Xia Chun didn't make them strip completely. He only required them to strip down to their underwear, so the female soldiers could check themselves, while he only inspected their belongings. After the inspection, Xia Chun carefully washed his hands with ice-cold water. He looked up as his eyes met Lin Shi's. You're back, Xia Chun said softly, then reported to Lin Shi. Everywhere has been checked. No abnormalities found so far. Lin Shi nodded slightly, acknowledging the report. What's next? Should we report to the higher-ups so they can evacuate the base personnel immediately? Lin Shi shook his head slowly. No need to evacuate. I have a way. Xia Chun's eyes lit up as he asked, what way? Follow me. Lin Shi didn't explain further, giving only a brief command before turning to walk away. Seeing this, Xia Chun quickly reported to the Bear Country Base Command and followed closely behind Lin Shi. Lin Shi headed toward the collection device. After walking a considerable distance, he stopped and turned to Gu Shui. How powerful will the explosion be? Gu Shui thought for a moment before answering. Based on the energy it has already absorbed and stored, it could likely submerge this entire island. Xia Chun was startled, but quickly regained his composure. Lin Shi continued, You people from the Triple Link continent mainly cultivate mental power. Can your mental power move objects? Gu Shui thought to herself that he was finally asking about her specialty. She tilted her chin up and said confidently, moving objects? That's child's play. Let me tell you, our mental power can do more than just move things. It can be used to kill. At this point, Gu Shui began to harbor thoughts of a sneak attack on Lin Shi. Then move that object in the sky toward the east. Lin Shi ordered, his expression unchanged. Gu Shui's eyes widened in disbelief. You want me to move the collector? That massive device weighs several tons. Even a normal person couldn't lift it, let alone using mental power. Although Gu Shui possessed level 8 mental power, people from the Triple Link continent only cultivated their minds and neglected their physical bodies, so they had no special physical abilities. To her, mental power was primarily for attacking and controlling. Moving such a heavy object was incredibly difficult. What? You can't do it? Lin Shi looked at her with a mix of provocation and contempt, as if he hadn't expected her to agree so easily. Gu Shui gritted her teeth and said, I can do it. Then go move the collector. We'll wait here. Don't try any tricks, and don't even think about running. You won't get away. Lin Shi stood his ground, about 10 kilometers away from the collector. Even if it exploded during the move, he would still have time to get Xia Chun away. Gu Shui gnashed her teeth. Lin Shi and Xia Chun watched as she walked toward the collector. Xia Chun asked, Are we keeping her? Keep her. Without her vessel, she's not a threat right now. Besides, her status on the Triple Link continent isn't low. We can gather a lot of information about her world from her. That makes her very valuable. The two men exchanged a look, understanding each other perfectly. Next, once the treasure basin finishes its upgrade, the next step is to head to the Triple Link continent. Whether it's Lin Shi or Xia Chun who goes, they need to gather enough information first. This was much better than blindly rushing in like before. Lin Shi locked onto Gu Shui with his mental power, watching her approach the collector. Then, Gu Shui raised both hands level with her head, her eyes fixed on the device in the sky. A stream of mental power extended from her brow to the collector. Slowly, the device began to move from its original position, heading east as Lin Shi had directed. However, calling this speed a snail's pace would be an understatement. Lin Shi used his mental power to urge her on. Hurry up. Did you not eat today? Gu Shui gritted her teeth. I know. Gu Shui increased the flow of her mental power. It wasn't that she didn't want to go faster, but the distance between her and the collector was too great, and the device was far too heavy. If she got too close, the energy in her body would be sucked dry by the collector. If Gu Shui knew that Lin Shi possessed incredibly powerful mental power and could easily move something as heavy as the collector, she would probably be speechless with shock. In truth, if Lin Shi didn't still suspect the information she provided was a lie, he would have moved it himself. Under Lin Shi's constant pressure, Gu Shui kept moving the collector. But by the time it got dark, she had only moved it about a dozen kilometers. Although she still had some mental strength left, her physical body was too weak. Under the collector's influence, she had fallen into a state of extreme exhaustion. Watching the surroundings get swallowed by darkness, she finally stopped and spoke into the empty space. That's enough for today. I need to rest. But there was no one around and no response. Just as she thought Lin Shi had left, his cold voice echoed from the shadows. I overestimated you. I didn't expect people from the Triple Link continent to be this weak. Lin Shi had her move the collector not just out of caution, but to test the abilities of those who cultivated mental power. Now it seemed that only cultivating the mind to project an astral body was still far too weak. Hearing this, Gu Shui's eyes widened, and she snapped back without backing down. If you're so capable, try it yourself. Moving an object weighing several tons from over 1,000 meters away, very few people on the Sanlian continent can do that. Ji Shui was very satisfied with her achievement of moving the collector a dozen kilometers today, but she was incredibly furious and indignant at Lin Shi's mockery. Lin Shi walked up to Ji Shui, looking at her coldly. A second later, with a mere thought, the massive collector in the sky seemed to be controlled by an invisible hand, rapidly shooting toward the east. The speed was astonishing, completely different from Ji Shui's snail-like pace just moments ago. It was pitch black all around, and Ji Shui couldn't see anything, but her spiritual power could still sense it. Because of this, she was even more in disbelief. The speed at which the collector moved, which she had just used all her strength for, was far surpassed by Lin Shi to an incomparable degree. Ji Shue's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. She stared at Lin Shi, muttering, "How is this possible?" Anyone who understood the Federation's history knew that the Sanlian continent was connected to a parallel world, a desolate land with no civilized tribes. It was thanks to people brought here from various places that human civilization was formed. Therefore, Ji Shue believed that whether in terms of technological advancement or individual power development, the Blue Planet was far inferior to the Sanlian continent. She couldn't accept that someone from this desolate planet could surpass her, an elite of the Sanlian continent. Moreover, on the Sanlian continent, with her outstanding strength, Ji Shue had never paid attention to peers weaker than her. Even when she was recently captured by Lin Shi as a prisoner, Ji Shue didn't feel she was inferior to him in any way. As long as she had the chance, she would definitely seize this rare opportunity to turn the tables and reverse the situation. Right? This is the perfect opportunity. Ji Shue stared intently at Lin Shi, who seemed completely focused on controlling the collector. A sly glint flashed in her eyes. Without hesitation, she mobilized all her spiritual power, transforming it into 3 sharp swords of energy, piercing straight toward Lin Shi from 3 different directions. Ji Shue firmly believed that Lin Shi, focusing his spiritual power to move the collector, must have used all his strength, perhaps even exhausting more than half of his spiritual power. But was that the truth? The answer was clearly no. The moment Ji Shue released her spiritual power, Lin Shi easily detected the fluctuation. With a single thought from Lin Shi, 3 massive swords, far more powerful than the spiritual energy swords Ji Shue created, appeared instantly, shattering Ji Shue's spiritual power in the blink of an eye. Ugh! Her spiritual power severely injured and her body weak, Ji Shue only let out a tragic scream before fainting. Xia Chun came from behind, looking at the unconscious Ji Shue in the snow. "How do we handle her?" "Bring her along. She's still useful." Xia Chun picked Ji Shue up from the ground, like carrying a corpse, and dragged her along behind Lin Shi. Their destination was the eastern sea of this island. Not long after, Lin Shi and Xia Chun reached the coast. The collector was also controlled by Lin Shi to arrive here. "Are you planning to drop the collector into the sea?" Xia Chun guessed Lin Shi's intention. "Yes, I want to drop it into the sea. Earlier, that woman said breaking the collector would cause it to explode," Xia Chun reminded him. "I know. I'll move it to an uninhabited area of the sea. Even if it explodes, we can't let them benefit." Xia Chun thought for a moment. Moving it to an uninhabited sea and sinking it underwater, the water pressure will somewhat reduce the destructive force of the explosion. Plus, the sea surface is currently covered in thick ice, so it won't cause a massive tsunami. I think we can contain the destructive force within a certain range. Then let's do that. Lin Shi controlled the collector from afar, continuing to move it deep into the sea. The collector continuously absorbed origin power and life force. Lin Shi had kept enough distance, and the amount of energy it had absorbed was within a controllable range. On the way, Ji Shue woke up, but she was completely exhausted. Even though she knew she was being dragged along in an incredibly humiliating manner, she had no ability to change the situation. With the body of a level 1 warrior, after having so much energy absorbed by the collector, Ji Shue couldn't even stand steady. Her legs had been scraped raw from being dragged over such a long distance. Her shoes and parts of her clothes were torn, and her heels were mangled and bloody. Ji Shue gritted her teeth and endured the pain, not begging for mercy. She knew this was punishment for her previous actions, and she also knew begging was useless. Because neither Lin Shi nor Xia Chun had any intention of showing tenderness to a woman. And so, the captain of the Federation's General Bureau Special Task Force, this woman who gritted her teeth and endured, fainted once again. Not long after, she woke up again from the pain. Lin Shi and Xia Chun moved very fast. Before long, the bones in Ji Shue's heels were exposed, dripping with blood. Fortunately, Ji Shue's willpower was very strong, coupled with the numbness from the cold, which kept her from dying of pain. An unknown amount of time later, when Ji Shue felt completely numb in her legs and was about to reach her breaking point and beg for mercy, Lin Shi said, We're here. They walked on the thick ice, heading deep into the sea. At this point, their location was far from the island nation. The extreme cold couldn't freeze the entire ocean on the blue planet. In the deep sea, there were still many unfrozen areas. The density of the seawater here was also great enough. Lin Shi brought Xia Chun and Ji Shui, who was now delirious, flying into the air to a certain altitude. Lin Shi moved the collector to the edge of his spiritual powers control range, confirming that even if it exploded, they could still retreat safely. Lin Shi's eyes narrowed slightly. A metallic glint, hard for ordinary people to see, flashed from deep within Lin Shi's eyes. The collector was still hovering in midair, absorbing energy. Suddenly, as if pressed down by a giant invisible hand from the sky, it plummeted rapidly into the water. Seawater can block matter, but the collector falling into the sea didn't explode immediately. Instead, like a pressed-down bouncy ball, it tried to float back up. Lin Shi had anticipated this. The moment the collector tried to break free from the water, he controlled a massive block of ice and slammed it down on top of it. Then, he grabbed Xia Chun and Gu Shui, retreating at maximum speed away from the device. Only a dozen seconds after Lin Shi left, a thunderous explosion, like the roar of an ancient monster, echoed from the distant sea. The massive ice block Lin Shi had placed on the collector was obliterated in an instant by the colossal force. The ice on the sea's surface, with the collector's explosion as the center, began to crack and shatter into pieces. In a heartbeat, it was pulverized by the powerful shockwave. The entire sea seemed to boil. Lin Shi, Xia Chun, and Gu Shui returned like a rainbow cutting across the horizon. The collector's explosion created a massive shockwave. Even though Lin Shi had retreated at full speed, they were still hit by the aftershock. However, to Lin Shi, that aftershock felt like nothing more than a light breeze against his face. We did it. Xia Chun's voice trembled with excitement, unable to hide the joy and emotion in his heart. Lin Shi also looked satisfied. The greatest achievement of this mission was preventing the people of the Triple Link continent from harvesting the Blue Star's energy. That earth-shattering explosion had the strongest impact on the thick ice layer. Within a 1,000-mile radius, the ice immediately cracked and disintegrated. Shards of ice flew everywhere, like a magnificent frozen feast upon the vast ocean. Countless fish carcasses floated to the surface, stretching as far as the eye could see. It was a staggering sight. Fortunately, the explosion didn't harm anyone. That was the best possible outcome. Looks like our icebreaker will have a much easier time now, Xia Chun said cheerfully, even cracking a joke. Having dealt with the collector, his mood was incredibly light. Lin Shi nodded in agreement. Afterward, he and the other two returned to the center of the explosion to see if they could recover any parts from the device. Unfortunately, the collector had been blown to bits. Not a single valuable component could be found. Thus, Lin Shi could only return to the Lin family base. As soon as they entered, Qin Shuang and the others, who had noticed Lin Shi's hurried departure earlier, recognized him. Seeing him return safely, everyone immediately rushed over, asking anxiously, "What happened? Is everything okay?" Qin Shuang noticed Gu Shui lying motionless on the ground. "Who is this?" Lin Shi answered them one by one. This beauty was possessed by a consciousness from the Triple Link continent. Her mental power is at level 8. Everyone, be careful. Initially, no one paid much attention to the unconscious Gu Shui, but once they learned she was from the other continent and possessed level 8 mental power, their attitudes became much more serious. "Is this another vessel incident?" Lin Mingjin asked. "Yeah." Lin Shi gave everyone a detailed account of everything that happened while he and Xia Chun were out, including the collector's explosion. "What you did was far too dangerous. Are you okay?" Long Rongran checked Lin Shi from head to toe with concern. "Don't worry, Dad. I kept a safe distance," Lin Shi replied softly, feeling that care was like a warm stream flowing into his heart. "Good. Now, what do you plan to do with this woman?" Lin Shi thought for a moment and said, "It's best to keep her in my courtyard. I won't feel at ease anywhere else. I'll have Ma Wang watch over her. Qin Shuang, help her tend to her wounds. Just make sure she doesn't die." "No problem." Qin Shuang helped Gu Shui up. Her legs were covered in blood. Early the next morning, Xia Chun returned to the official base to report the explosion to Lin Tianrui and the others. Upon hearing the news, Lin Tianrui immediately dispatched all icebreakers to the explosion site to salvage the fish killed by the blast. In a time of food scarcity, these fish couldn't go to waste. Even if they couldn't eat them all now, they could be canned or dried. The base had over 1 billion people to feed. Besides seafood, raising primordial beasts and growing edible mutant plants were the main food sources. As for pre-apocalyptic supplies, the base tried to use them as sparingly as possible. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the window, creating dappled patches of light in the room. After a night of unconsciousness, Gu Shui slowly opened her eyes. As soon as she woke up, she felt her entire body aching, especially her legs. It felt as if they had been sliced by a sharp saw. The pain was excruciating. Gu Shui forced herself to sit up, her gaze immediately going to her legs. She saw that the gruesome wounds had been treated and bandaged, but the bandaging was clumsy and crude. Gu Shui looked around, shocked to find herself in a completely unfamiliar room. The room was incredibly large, unlike any normal living quarters. As Gu Shui was wondering where she was, a strange sensation washed over her. She turned her head and came face to face with a pair of eyes as big as basketballs. They were bizarre eyes, one blue, one red, radiating a mysterious light. Normally, Gu Shui would have been mesmerized by the majestic appearance of this giant wolf. But a second later, she snapped to her senses, realizing the danger she was in. Am I in a wolf's den? She thought. Just then, Ma Wang suddenly opened his massive jaws and lunged at her. Gu Shui didn't hesitate, immediately launching a mental attack. She didn't expect to fail. Her mental strike felt like hitting a thick wall, having no effect on Ma Wang at all. Ma Wang opened his mouth wide, clamped down on Gu Shui's clothes, and brought her before Lin Shi as fast as the wind. It was so fast she didn't even have time to react. You're awake, Lin Shi said, sitting in a rocking chair and soaking up the sun. That was his favorite thing to do. When he was free, he liked to feel the warmth of the sun. It also allowed him to intuitively sense the temperature changes after the apocalypse. Gu Shui thought she was about to be eaten, but instead, she was dropped in front of Lin Shi. She pointed at Ma Wang in disbelief, her voice trembling as she asked, "Did you tame this wolf?" She had never encountered such a powerful, intelligent, and human-like beast. It acted on its own without needing a command from its master. Back on the Triple Link continent, wild beasts were never intelligent and were terrified of strong mental power. After dropping Gu Shui, Ma Wang lay down beside Lin Shi and used his claws to write on the ground. Master, this woman just attacked me. Gu Shui's eyes widened, and her jaw dropped. She couldn't believe her eyes. This massive, powerful wolf was actually tattling to its master. And that wasn't all, it could write. If you want to hit her, go ahead, Lin Shi said indifferently, seemingly unconcerned with Gu Shui's life or death. Gu Shui's eyes widened even further as she saw Ma Wang raise a powerful paw and wave it in front of her a few times, as if deciding where to start. Gu Shui took a deep breath, crying out in her heart, "I'm sorry. It was my fault. I thought you were going to eat me, so I attacked." She hurriedly bowed and apologized to Ma Wang. She knew she was in a weak position. If she didn't apologize quickly, the consequences would be dire. After all, facing such a giant, powerful wolf, she stood no chance. Plus, Lin Shi was right there. But Ma Wang still didn't accept her apology. He took a few steady steps until he was right in front of her. At this moment, Gu Shui truly felt the crushing pressure from the giant wolf. "If you kill me, you'll never get any information about the Triple Link continent." She suddenly shouted at Lin Shi, her voice turning sharp with tension. But despite her pleas and threats, Lin Shi remained indifferent. "Honestly, I'm just curious about the Triple Link continent. I don't necessarily need to know anything. I can't even go there, so what use is that information to me? Since you've offended Ma Wang, your life ends here." Lin Shi narrowed his eyes, his expression cold. Gu Shui was terrified. She had originally wanted to trade what she knew for Lin Shi's mercy, but he said he didn't care. Gu Shui suddenly thought of something and blurted out, "If you kill me, the Federal General Bureau of the Triple Link continent will activate the primordial pillars." Clearly, this was her final trump card. Lin Shi's face finally lost its indifference, but his expression became incredibly mocking. "Since you know about the primordial pillars, do you know that I've already taken them into my storage space?" Gu Shui really didn't know. Previously, The research institute had reported losing the signal of one pillar. Could it be that another one had lost its signal too? Gu Shui was in despair. At this moment, she remembered her life back on the Triple Link continent. From childhood, she had always been a top student, a good girl in everyone's eyes, and a role model for women there. But now, she had only been in this world for 2 days and was about to die a pointless death. She couldn't accept this. Seeing Ma Wang approach, Gu Shui finally broke. Her pride vanished, and she collapsed to the ground, kneeling. Please, don't kill me. I beg you. I'll tell you everything I know about the Triple Link continent. Ma Wang turned his head and wrote on the ground. Master, where is the Triple Link continent? Just another world outside the blue star. Ma Wang continued writing. I'm a bit curious about it. Why not let her tell us? And then we can deal with her later. Since you want to hear it, then we'll listen. Lin Shi curled his lips slightly, revealing a faint, almost imperceptible smile. The man and the dog were in perfect sync. Gu Shui's face was pale, and she was utterly terrified. Seeing that Ma Wang didn't kill her immediately, she felt like she had just escaped death. She almost collapsed but managed to stay calm, took a deep breath, and began telling them about the Triple Link continent. This time, she didn't hide anything, pouring out every bit of information she knew. She talked for over half a month. Every day, Gu Shui tried her best to recall and share her knowledge. She even recounted things she had learned from books to Lin Shi and the others. Xia Chun listened intently, looking excited. Lin Shi kept his eyes closed, appearing to rest, but he was actually focused on every word. Lin Siyuan and Ma Wang were also fascinated by this other world. Time passed, and more than half a month had gone by. Gu Shui told them everything from the current state of the Triple Link continent to its ancient history and mysterious legends. When she ran out of things to say, she even made up a few strange stories to keep going. Finally, Lin Shi interrupted her, signaling that she didn't need to speak anymore. By now, everyone had a comprehensive and deep understanding of the Triple Link continent. The treasure basin's upgrade was also complete. This high-level vessel has 3 abilities. Choose one. The treasure basin displayed a series of text. Finally, it's here. The first is an offensive ability called Thorns of Thought. It can fire up to 100 sharp thorns. The second is called Shadow Follower, which allows the user to control weapons with their will, automatically locking onto and pursuing targets. Finally, there's a spatial ability called Absolute Space. It enhances the durability and stability of the space. With this, if you want to go to the Triple Link continent, we can carry much more primordial energy and supplies. Ever since Lin Shi warned the treasure basin not to act on its own, it had let him choose which ability to keep. In truth, Lin Shi didn't care much for the first 2. The first was like trash compared to his own strength. The second was the same. Only the third was useful. Whether he went to the Triple Link continent or not, if the space was stable enough, he could finally store the other primordial pillar and end that trouble. Thinking about how Gu Shui could bring items through the space tunnel to the blue star, it must have been thanks to this kind of ability. Lin Shi said, then I'll choose the third one, Absolute Space. Right. As soon as he checked the treasure basin's interface, the new ability was there. Now, the treasure basin's functions had become incredibly diverse: stealth, charm, absolute space, item duplication, and world reversal. Gray, you asked me to upgrade twice, and I've done it. So, where is your sincerity? Lin Shi asked with a frown. Go back to your room and enter seclusion first. Hearing this, Lin Shi hesitated for a moment, but ultimately listened to the treasure basin. He stood up, said goodbye to everyone, and returned to his cultivation room. Except for Ma Wang, no one was allowed in. Even Ma Wang rarely entered, usually just waiting outside the door. Lin Shi went inside, sat cross-legged, adjusted his breathing, and asked, "Is this okay? I'm starting." As soon as he spoke, a powerful wave of sleepiness washed over him. Immediately after, a heavy buzzing sound echoed in his head. Something was rushing into his brain at high speed. Lin Shi couldn't react before everything went black. Wake up! Wake up! A soft but anxious voice called out. Lin Shi slowly opened his eyes. His vision, blurry at first, gradually cleared. He was surprised to see an innocent-looking boy standing before him. He reached out and shook him. "Brother, you're finally awake. Let's go play?" The boy waited happily for an answer, but before Lin Shi could say anything, his body sat up automatically. He felt a strange energy controlling his throat, producing a voice completely different from his thoughts. I'm sorry, Xiaoyan. I have something important to handle. I can't play with you. Go find your teddy bears. I'm sure you'll have fun. Hearing this, the boy was clearly disappointed, but he didn't cry. He nodded understandingly and turned to leave quietly. Watching the boy's retreating figure, Lin Shi normally wouldn't have felt anything, but right now, he felt a pang of guilt within this body. Looking ahead, Lin Shi was stunned to see mountains of documents and books piled up before him. He noticed a pair of small hands picking up a document and flipping through it. Lin Shi immediately realized this situation was exactly like the first time he ate the golden fruit. The difference was that this time, he had completely lost control of the body. He was just an observer. Lin Shi knew this body wasn't his. To be precise, he had become another consciousness within this body, unable to act, only able to passively experience everything. As the hands flipped through the books, Lin Shi could clearly see the documents. The writing was similar to the Chinese characters on Blue Star, but not exactly the same. There were Arabic numerals and some strange symbols, like some kind of formula. Soon, Lin Shi knew whose body he was in. Anat 34. Qingzhou. A clear female voice called out from outside the room. Hearing that name, Lin Shi understood immediately. He was currently seeing through the eyes of the consciousness that once existed within the treasure basin, experiencing what the other had gone through. Following the voice outside, the hands stopped flipping through the documents. Then, they slowly closed the book, and a sigh escaped. Coming. After saying that, Qingzhou slowly stood up. Only now did Lin Shi have a chance to observe the room. It was cramped and cluttered. It was only a few square meters. Besides the entrance, there was only a small door leading to a bathroom. Qingzhou walked over and opened the door. Standing outside was a young girl in her teens, quite a bit taller than Qingzhou. Lin Shi realized that what he was seeing through Qingzhou's eyes was definitely her childhood. He guessed the boy was no more than 13. Qingzhou took the lunchbox and thanked the girl. Thank you. Leave the box at the gate when you're done. Like Hai said, she pushed her cart away to serve the others. Qingzhou carefully carried the lunchbox back to the room and placed it gently on the pile of books on the desk. He found a small, clean spot for the box and slowly opened the lid. A mixed, hot aroma of food hit his face. Inside was something dark and mushy, made from unknown ingredients. But Qingzhou didn't look disgusted. On the contrary, he flashed a satisfied smile and began to eat heartily. At the same time, Lin Shi, inside Qingzhou, felt incredibly strange. As the food entered Qingzhou's mouth, Lin Shi also clearly perceived that unique taste. Every bite, every swallow, felt as if he were tasting it himself. Qingzhou slowly finished the food. As the box emptied, Lin Shi also felt a distinct sense of fullness. A feeling of satisfaction flooded his consciousness. At this moment, Lin Shi felt like another soul hiding in this body. Although he couldn't control it, he felt everything it experienced. Now Lin Shi truly understood the sincerity the treasure basin spoke of. Qingzhou was doing this so Lin Shi could understand the triple link continent and himself through a first-person perspective. This experience was undoubtedly the most effective and profound method. After eating, Qingzhou left the box at the gate and returned to his documents. Time passed, about 20-some days. The process was tedious, but in those 20 days, he remembered everything perfectly. Combined with the documents he had seen, Lin Shi understood and memorized many characters from the triple link continent. One day, a soft but steady knock sounded at the gate, accompanied by a man's low voice. Alex, 34. Qingzhou. It's time for the exam. Go to exam room 2 immediately. This was the third voice Lin Shi had heard. After the boy from the first day and the girl who brought food every day, Lin Shi sensed it the moment he heard that voice. Qingzhou seemed to become tense. However, Qingzhou didn't show much confusion. He just took a deep breath and replied calmly, I'm coming. After saying that, Qingzhou exhaled slowly, as if trying to release the pressure in his heart. Then, he walked to the door without hesitation. Only now did Lin Shi see through Qingzhou's eyes what the outside world actually looked like. When Qingzhou opened the door, a wide and tall corridor appeared. It was about 3 meters wide and 4 meters high. The entire corridor stretched straight ahead, with identical rooms on both sides, like countless clones lined up. Only the numbers on the doors were different. Qing Zhou's room was numbered AZ-34. He gently closed the door and walked with a steady pace toward the left end of the corridor. Along the way, he met many people dressed like him, but no one greeted or spoke to each other. Everyone was focused on their own business. Most of them were gathered in small groups, whispering to each other. Lin Shi could hear words like specialized assessment exam from a distance. Not long after, Qing Zhou arrived at a door gleaming with a metallic sheen. This was exam room 2. Pushing the door open, what met his eyes wasn't the examiner Lin Shi expected, but rows of cold metal desks and chairs arranged neatly. Qing Zhou entered the room, found his seat according to the number on the desk, and sat down, waiting in silence for the exam to begin. Moments later, more and more candidates entered. Time passed quietly. Suddenly, a solemn bell echoed throughout the room. Immediately after, the metal tabletop in front of Qing Zhou slowly lowered, and an electronic screen emerged. Beside it was a pen. At the same time, a mechanical voice announced, "The exam begins." Qing Zhou picked up the pen and started the exam. Lin Shi was still in the early stages of recognizing characters. Although he understood many words, the exam questions were still difficult for him. However, Qing Zhou worked very fast. Before long, he had written an answer on the screen and flipped to the next page. Time ticked away. Lin Shi could see that all the candidates were focused on their papers. No one spoke. The only sound was the scratching of pens on screens. Qing Zhou wrote like the wind. His speed was astonishing. Before the time was up, he had completed all the questions. After finishing, Qing Zhou looked up and observed the other candidates. From his perspective, Lin Shi noticed the exam was quite difficult. The candidates were either flushed and sweating, pale and bloodless, or frowning with exhaustion. In short, no one looked relaxed. Finally, with a deep and solemn bell, the bright electronic screens suddenly went black. Immediately after, a cold mechanical voice spoke. "The exam is over. All candidates, please remain in your seats. The system is calculating scores." After 60 short seconds, the screen in front of Qing Zhou lit up again. A bright red number appeared, 98. Below that impressive high score was a warm notification. "Congratulations to candidate AZ-34, Qing Zhou. You have passed the Scientist Specialized Assessment exam, ranking first. Your professor will upgrade your room shortly. Please wait in your room." First place. Lin Shi was slightly surprised. At the same time, he felt a surge of joy from the bottom of Qing Zhou's heart. Qing Zhou returned to his room and began packing. He had very few belongings, just a change of clothes and a few personal items. Lin Shi saw Qing Zhou pull a box from under the bed and carefully pack it with the rest. Since he couldn't control the body or use any abilities, Lin Shi didn't know what was in the box. Just as the system said. Soon, a knock sounded at the door. A tall, middle-aged man with a stern expression pushed the door open. Behind him were 2 soldiers holding strange-looking firearms, radiating an overwhelming aura. By now, quite a few people had gathered in the corridor, all staring at the middle-aged man and the soldiers. Their gazes were complex, some fearful, some admiring, some worried, and some envious. "You're Qing Zhou, right?" the man asked, observing him. Under that sharp gaze, Qing Zhou was a bit nervous. He nodded. "I am your mentor, Bai Zhe. First of all, congratulations on becoming my youngest student this year. Now, please follow me out of here," Bai Zhe said, his voice devoid of emotion. Hearing this, Qing Zhou quickly replied, "Yes. Please wait a moment. I need to grab my personal things." He went back into the room to get his packed luggage. But when Bai Zhe saw him holding it, he frowned, his tone annoyed. "No need for those. At my lab, everything you need has been prepared for you." Qing Zhou slowly set down the heavy suitcase, keeping only the mysterious box from under the bed. He whispered, "Can I bring this, mentor?" Having received permission, Qing Zhou happily hugged the box to his chest. "Let's go." Mentor Bai Zhe led the way, and Qing Zhou followed closely. His gaze was caught by a prominent letter A at the end of the corridor, then another corridor marked B. Lin Shi saw the boy who had broken into Qing Zhou's room over 20 days ago. He was sitting on the floor with other children, happily playing with scraps of paper. Hearing footsteps, they looked up. The boy immediately recognized Qing Zhou and called out excitedly, "Big brother. It's big brother Qing Zhou." Qing Zhou smiled and waved, replying gently, Xiao Yun, I'm leaving Sector A. I'll see you later. Qing Zhou felt a sense of nostalgia, sadness, and a bit of regret. Xiao Yun didn't understand what this goodbye meant, and just waved back happily. See you later. Qing Zhou quickly followed Mentor Baizhe and disappeared at the end of Corridor B. Baizhe seemed to sense Qing Zhou's regret. He turned and said, You're a genius, different from those ordinary people. Leaving that place early is a good thing. I'm very interested in your ideas about the invention the Federation is researching. From now on, you'll work in the lab with me. As long as you work hard, the Federation won't fail you. Yes, Mentor. At this moment, Qing Zhou was full of hope for the future. Qing Zhou followed Mentor Baizhe through many strictly guarded and high-tension areas, finally arriving at the lab his mentor had mentioned. The lab was spacious and bright, filled with all sorts of modern equipment and experimental tools that were dazzling to behold. From now on, this is your dormitory and your lab. You can perform any experiments related to vessels and freely test whatever you imagine. If you need anything, just open this light brain and enter the required materials. Someone will bring them to you shortly. As for study materials, I've granted you Level A access. You can use the light brain to read and research all published scientific documents in the Institute. My lab is in Sector 1, Room 1. If you encounter any problems, you can call me through the light brain. Any more questions? If not, I'm leaving. I'm very busy. Mentor Baizhe spoke concisely, looking at Qing Zhou. Qing Zhou shook his head quickly. Nothing, Mentor. After Baizhe left, Qing Zhou returned to his lab, excitedly checking the equipment. After examining everything and understanding their general uses, Qing Zhou remembered to sleep. He found a small separate room in the corner of the lab. Just as Mentor Baizhe said, it was fully equipped for living. Qing Zhou carefully placed the box in his hand under the bed and lay down, ending an exhausting day. The time that followed was incredibly monotonous. From Lin Shi's perspective, every day Qing Zhou was either looking for documents or conducting experiments. Time passed, and Qing Zhou went from being awkward and shy to becoming more proficient and confident. At his request, the equipment in the lab also grew more numerous. Until one day, Qing Zhou felt like he'd been hit by a bolt of lightning. He trembled, his face beaming with joy as he held up the object in his hand and shouted, I did it. His voice was no longer as childish as before, but quite mature. The object in his hand was a crude bowl. If you considered it a normal bowl, no one would care if it were thrown on the street. But to Qing Zhou, this bowl was as precious as a treasure. Because this was the first vessel he had truly made himself. He couldn't contain his joy and excitement, rushing to show it to Mentor Baizhe. You have to understand, since entering the lab, this was the first time he had proactively sought out Mentor Baizhe. Mentor, I did it. I really did it. Qing Zhou stammered, carefully presenting the bowl vessel. Mentor Baizhe took it indifferently, glanced at it, and casually tossed it into a nearby trash can. He frowned and scolded sternly, such sloppy work, and you have the nerve to show it to me? Hearing this, Qing Zhou's ecstatic mood felt like it had been on a roller coaster, plummeting into a deep abyss in an instant. I'll definitely make a more perfect vessel next time. At this moment, Qing Zhou still held a glimmer of hope, longing for his mentor's praise. But he didn't know this was only the beginning. 4 years later, Qing Zhou created his second vessel, this time a bracelet. This bracelet was clearly much more exquisite than the first one. But when he brought it to Mentor Baizhe's lab, he was once again met with criticism and rebuke. This made Qing Zhou start to doubt himself. A few days later, Qing Zhou was still brooding over Mentor Baizhe's criticism. One day, he went to the library as usual to find materials. Although he could view them on the light brain, he still preferred the feel of a book. After finishing his research and returning to the lab, Qing Zhou discovered signs that someone had been inside. Not only were the experimental tools messed up, but his data had also been accessed. What angered him most was that the box he hid under the bed had been opened, and the item inside was smashed to pieces. Lin Shi only now realized, from the shards on the floor, what Qing Zhou had so carefully kept in that box. It was just a bowl. Thinking about how this bowl was the first vessel Qing Zhou made, and remembering the design of the treasure basin, Lin Shi guessed there was a connection. This bowl was definitely important to Qing Zhou. Sure enough, Qing Zhou guessed who had entered his lab. He ran straight to Mentor Baizhe's lab in a rage. Trying to contain his anger, He said, "Minter, someone was in my lab today. It was you, wasn't it?" Seeing Qing Zhou arrive, Baizhi remained nonchalant, continuing his work. "So what if it was me?" Qing Zhou was furious. "Minter, give me a reason. Why did you enter my lab when I wasn't there? Why did you touch my things?" "Your lab? You are my student. I have the right to enter your lab. Now get out. Don't disturb my experiment." Qing Zhou glanced at the experiment Baizhi was doing and widened his eyes in disbelief. "You stole my data." At that moment, Baizhi was adjusting the very vessel experimental data that Qing Zhou had spent countless days and nights calculating. "What's yours is mine. You are my student. Everything you research belongs to me," Baizhi said calmly. Qing Zhou was so angry his lungs felt like they would burst at Baizhi's shamelessness. He stormed off, wanting to find someone to stand up for him. But reality quickly doused him with cold water. As a professor at the Sector 1 Research Institute, Baizhi's power and status in this experimental zone were supreme. It was impossible for Qing Zhou to clear his name by telling everyone Baizhi stole his work, unless Qing Zhou could reach the high-ranking officials of the Federation. Ultimately, he returned to his lab in a state of helplessness. But once back, the more he thought about it, the more unfair it felt. If all my hard work only benefits that bastard, then why should I even try anymore? Qing Zhou had lost all faith. So, for the next few months, he stopped researching vessels. He glued the broken bowl back together, put it back under the bed, and then did nothing at all. Every day he was lethargic. If he wasn't eating, he was sleeping, and if he wasn't sleeping, he was staring blankly. Until he received a notification from his light brain. If he continued to be this lazy and unproductive for the next few months, the Federation would wipe all his memories related to the Institute and exile him to the continent to fend for himself. Receiving the exile notice, Qing Zhou stood frozen as if struck by lightning. But very quickly, he regained his composure from the initial shock and resignation. Realizing he couldn't stay submerged in despair forever, Qing Zhou snapped out of it and returned to his research. However, unlike before, he didn't rush to try and create a higher-level vessel. He chose to go back to the beginning, picking up the crude bowl vessel that Minter Baizhi had tossed away like trash at the start. Perhaps his experiences had taught him a lesson. Even if he researched a more perfect vessel, it would still become someone else's achievement. So, he decided to re-examine and refine the first version of the vessel. Sometimes, the simplest tools hide the deepest principles. This time, Qing Zhou clearly slowed his pace. Those manufacturing processes he had repeated countless times now held a completely new meaning in his eyes. Every small detail, every turn, seemed to hide endless mysteries waiting for him to discover. As time passed, even Lin Shi, who was always watching Qing Zhou, had completely mastered the methods and principles of vessel creation. Through this direct observation and learning, Lin Shi became fluent in the writing and language of the Triple Link continent. As for Qing Zhou, his understanding of vessels grew even deeper. But he didn't create a better vessel. He continued to study the fundamentals. On the other side, Baizhi still thought Qing Zhou's time had passed, and that he couldn't research anything better. Aside from stopping by Qing Zhou's lab once, he didn't return. Baizhi assembled his own research team to work on version 2.0 of the vessel Qing Zhou had created, wanting to use it as a model to create a more powerful and perfect vessel. The entire team consisted of Baizhi's students, with only Qing Zhou excluded. But even if Baizhi had invited him, he definitely wouldn't have gone. Baizhi had no idea that his version 2.0 was already riddled with flaws discovered by Qing Zhou. In terms of structure and stability, it was far inferior to Qing Zhou's version 1.0. On a wrong research path, no matter what you create, it will only be a bigger mistake. Did you guys hear? A high-ranking federal official is coming to our lab. Really? Who is it? I heard it's the vice president of the Federation, Sheng Zhao. Him again? The youngest level 9 cultivator in history and the commander-in-chief of the Federal Army. Why is he coming here? Isn't it because our mentor researched a vessel for the soldiers to use? This is a great invention that could change the entire Federation's situation. I heard that with this vessel, the mortality rate of soldiers dealing with wild beasts could drop by 10%. The Federation loses so many people every year to wild beasts. If the mortality rate drops by 10%, that's truly incredible. That day, Qing Zhou had just left the library when he heard two people gossiping about Baizhi. And the vessel. He also heard the news that the vice president was coming. The opportunity we've been waiting for is finally here. Qing Zhou returned to the lab. A month later, the highly anticipated Vice President Sheng Zhao finally arrived at Lab 1, Sector 1, led by Bai Zhe. Accompanying him were several other high-ranking federal officials, the Chief of Staff of the Federal War Zone, the Commander of the Federal Vanguard Combat Team, and the Minister of Finance. Lab 1 was buzzing. Today, professors from other experimental zones also flocked here, just to witness the moment that was said to change human history. Bai Zhe carefully took an item out of an encrypted chest, looking as if he were holding a priceless treasure. Everyone's eyes were fixed on it. It turned out to be a bracelet, much more exquisite and unique in design than Qing Zhou's product. Bai Zhe introduced it with a smug look. Sir, this is the result of meticulous research and improvement by myself and my students. It has a miraculous function. It can create a solid protective shield around the body, enough to resist attacks that don't exceed its load capacity. After speaking, he didn't forget to take all the credit for himself and named the vessel God Shield. Hearing this, everyone was shocked. A small bracelet could have such terrifying defensive power? It was truly hard to believe. A moment of chaos erupted in the crowd. Sheng Zhao remained very calm. He took the bracelet and slowly put it on his wrist. Then he focused his mind, trying to activate the vessel's energy. Everyone held their breath, nervously watching Sheng Zhao's every move, waiting for the vice president to give his final verdict. After a long while, Sheng Zhao said softly, "Not bad." Hearing this, the smile on Bai Zhe's face couldn't be hidden. His face was filled with uncontrollable joy. It seemed that as long as he was recognized by this man, he would surely secure the position of honorary dean of the Federation. Others also looked at Bai Zhe with admiration, some even expressing extreme worship for his incredible achievement. Those gazes converged on Bai Zhe, making him the center of attention. Bai Zhe was floating with pride. But then, a discordant voice rang out from outside the crowd. "You've only created something mediocre. What's there to be proud of?" The crowd stirred. Everyone turned to look toward the source of the voice. Qing Zhou walked slowly into the lab. He had been outside for a long time, just observing the situation. Only after Sheng Zhao finished testing Bai Zhe's product did he speak up to grab everyone's attention. Seeing Qing Zhou, Bai Zhe's brow furrowed. Thinking Qing Zhou was there to cause trouble, he barked, "What are you doing here?" "Sir, this is one of my students. He's often stubborn, refuses to take his experiments seriously, and spends all his time playing around. I'm currently petitioning the Federation to expel him from my lab." Bai Zhe quickly explained to Sheng Zhao. It turned out Bai Zhe had already prepared a plan. It was just that Qing Zhou had entered the lab years ago with the highest theoretical score, so Bai Zhe couldn't expel him quickly without approval from headquarters. Qing Zhou stepped in front of Sheng Zhao and the crowd. He stared at Sheng Zhao and said, "You're the vice president of the Federation, right? I also have a vessel I'd like you to see." Bai Zhe was furious. "Insolent. This is no place for you. Get out now. Guards, take him away." Bai Zhe shouted, immediately calling for security. Qing Zhou spoke calmly. "Mentor, please stay calm. Wait until I prove my vessel is more refined than yours, and then I'll leave on my own." The crowd buzzed again. Sector 1 and other experimental zones were always competitive, but there had never been a case of a mentor and student clashing like this. Moreover, today all the high-ranking officials were gathered, and such a scene was truly an eye-opener. "You have a better vessel?" Sheng Zhao stared at Qing Zhou. Even Lin Shi, inside Qing Zhou's body, felt the powerful mental pressure from this man. "Lord Sheng Zhao, don't listen to his nonsense. This student is a fraud. Let me lead him away." Bai Zhe intervened hurriedly, wanting to defuse the situation. But if Sheng Zhao, the vice president of the Federal General Bureau, didn't speak, none of the other guards dared to move. "Take it out and let me see," Sheng Zhao said, clearly addressing Qing Zhou. Qing Zhou took a vessel out of his pocket. "This vessel of mine has two functions. First, it absorbs energy from the environment to enhance the user's physical constitution. Second, it can store items. Items inside are not affected by time and will not spoil." At first glance, the functions of Qing Zhou's vessel didn't seem as strong as the shield vessel Bai Zhe had presented. But in reality, those who understood wild beasts knew they were incredibly powerful. Relying solely on Bai Zhe's shield vessel wouldn't be enough to fully resist them. When fighting wild beasts, soldiers could only keep their distance and use mental power to destroy them. Once a beast got close, it was certain death. But the vessel in Qing Zhou's hand could not only absorb external energy to strengthen the user, but also had an incredible storage capacity. These two functions were extremely practical and valuable. Sheng Zhao carefully took the vessel from Qing Zhou. At this moment, the crowd became quieter than ever. People looked at Bai Zhe, then at Qing Zhou. What exactly had happened between this teacher and student to lead to this? Everyone understood that for the same type of vessel, there could only be one inventor. It was either Bai Zhe or this student named Qing Zhou. The one who created the better vessel would be recognized as the true inventor. The one who made the inferior version would surely be seen as a copycat and a plagiarist. The moment Sheng Zhao held Qing Zhou's vessel, a piece of equipment as tall as two people in the lab suddenly vanished, then reappeared in another spot. Through Sheng Zhao's explanation, everyone began to understand the true effect of Qing Zhou's vessel. This storage ability, if used correctly, could absolutely be an offensive or life-saving power. Very good. Very good. This time, Sheng Zhao praised it repeatedly. It was a stark contrast to the simple, not bad, he gave Bai Zhe's vessel earlier. It was clear to everyone whose vessel was superior. This caused the way people looked at Bai Zhe to change completely. Bai Zhe's face shifted visibly, from red to black, then to a pale white. Facing so many powerful figures of the Federation and being proven inferior by his own student, possibly even having his name tarnished forever, how could Bai Zhe accept this? He pointed at Qing Zhou, raging, "You ungrateful brat. I did my best to guide your research, and you betray me like this? You plagiarized my research data. Do you think creating a better vessel than mine means you can step all over me? Lord Sheng Zhao, the other students can testify for me. This vessel was my invention. This kid is plagiarizing my research." Sheng Zhao frowned, his impatience clear. Obviously, the busy vice president didn't want to waste time on such petty squabbles. Sheng Zhao looked toward Qing Zhou. "Prove that you made this vessel in the shortest time possible." Qing Zhou was secretly relieved. His biggest worry, that the vice president might be biased, didn't happen. This man was straightforward. Without clear evidence, he wouldn't blindly believe one side. Qing Zhou then took out his light brain, presenting the truth to everyone. He opened it, and the screen displayed countless data points and drawings. It was the entire record of his vessel manufacturing since entering the Sector 1 lab, including every step, every test, and all related data analysis. From the moment he handcrafted the first vessel until now, not a single detail was missing. Qing Zhou continued, "Not only that, but the idea for the vessel was also first proposed by me. You can look up my exam papers from 5 years ago when I took the promotion exam at the training center. My current vessel design, its structural framework, and the manufacturing technology are completely different from Bai Zhe's. In fact, Mentor Bai Zhe took my original vessel data as a model to create his product. His vessel might have some functions, but the overall structure is extremely unstable. Once it encounters a certain level of external force, it's very likely to be damaged in combat, or even backfire on the user." As soon as he finished, Sheng Zhao waved his hand, signaling the person behind him to verify it immediately. Everyone sprang into action, and an urgent investigation was launched. Hearing this, Bai Zhe's face turned instantly pale. Beads of sweat as large as beans rolled down his forehead. His eyes darted around, seemingly still wanting to make excuses. The idea for the vessel was indeed mine, but the research direction at that time was entirely based on my suggestions. Now it's suddenly his achievement? Lord Sheng Zhao, please, you must investigate the truth. Bai Zhe cried out emotionally. But Qing Zhou didn't care about his protests. He even found them laughable. These emotions were deeply felt by Lin Shi, the other soul within Qing Zhou's body. Qing Zhou wanted to end his last 5 years. He didn't want to stay in this lab anymore. If this lab still harbors people like Bai Zhe, I'd rather give up my research dreams. Whether your so-called research direction belongs to you or not, just looking at your current manufacturing method, it's already flawed. Today is the first time I've entered this lab in 2 years, but I can tell everyone that the vessel in his hand is a substandard product. If you don't believe me, just test it. That vessel will fail as soon as it's hit by external force. Qing Zhou spoke with great authority. For the past 2 years, he had poured all his effort into fundamental vessel research. He knew better than anyone the design flaws he had discovered years ago. Sheng Zhao picked up Baijia's bracelet vessel again. He handed it to a guard beside him. He signaled for the guard to put it on. The guard didn't hesitate to wear the bracelet, while another guard prepared to attack with a weapon. The first attack came, and the guard wearing the bracelet quickly activated the internal shield. He successfully blocked the attack. The second attack was the same. The guard easily neutralized the danger thanks to the vessel's power. But when the third attack hit, the situation changed abruptly. Just as the guard tried to use the vessel to defend against this close-range strike, the vessel suddenly shot out a blinding burst of sparks upon impact. Instantly, a fierce fire erupted, swallowing the guard in a heartbeat. The guard didn't even have time to scream before falling unconscious. His life or death was unknown. Everyone panicked. The other guards rushed over to extinguish the fire. However, after the fire was out, they found the injured guard had already lost all signs of life. You have to understand, given the guard's initial injuries, although he was severely burned, it shouldn't have caused immediate death. Yet now he was gone. At the same time, the person investigating the data returned with results that matched Qing Zhou's words. Qing Zhou's research was indeed completed before Baijia's. Previously, Baijia had intentionally ordered someone to delete the foundational data of Qing Zhou's original research. After that, Baijia began reporting to the Federation to have Qing Zhou expelled from the lab. He even planned to have someone destroy the evidence once Qing Zhou was gone. That way, all the credit for the vessel would belong to Baijia alone. Baijia had done this kind of thing many times before, but this time, he ran into a vice president with even more power. Sheng Zhao had supreme authority. Forget deleting data. Even if the light brain was destroyed, as long as it had left a trace, he could easily find the clues. Faced with this evidence, Baijia could no longer defend himself. He stood there awkwardly, only muttering, "It's not like that. It's not like that." Baijia was led away by guards, stripped of his professorship at the Sector 1 lab. Qing Zhou also left the Sector 1 lab. This time, his name was cleared, and it echoed throughout the Federation. When Sheng Zhao asked Qing Zhou what reward he wanted, Qing Zhou said he wanted to go to the surface to see and wanted his own private lab there, undisturbed by anyone. This was an exception. Initially, the high-ranking federal officials didn't agree. Most federal scientists never left the underground fortresses their entire lives. Only commoners had to work on the surface, facing the constant danger of wild beast attacks. But Qing Zhou was adamant, and stated he could create a much more sophisticated version of the vessel than the current one. The condition was that he be given the environment he wanted and a higher-level primordial planet. Thus, Sheng Zhao, the vice president of the Federal General Bureau, finally granted Qing Zhou's request. After all of Qing Zhou's efforts, Lin Shi finally witnessed the sky of the Triple Link continent. From then on, a new world seemed to open up before Qing Zhou, and Lin Shi traveled with him to the most remote corners of the continent. During this time, Qing Zhou made breakthrough progress in vessel research. He successfully controlled the energy generated by vessels within a certain range, creating countless powerful vessels for the federal soldiers. These vessels became powerful weapons that helped them defeat wild beasts, protect their families, significantly increase their win rates, and reduce casualties for the brave soldiers. Time flew by, until one day, the respected vice president of the Federal General Bureau paid a personal visit. This time, he brought a treasure that left everyone in awe, an incredibly rare level 9 primal crystal. Lin Shi immediately realized a decisive turning point was coming. If he didn't mess this up, this level 9 primal crystal would be the primary material for crafting the treasure bowl. From that day on, Qing Zhou seemed to lose himself. He poured his entire body and soul into researching and designing this level 9 primal crystal. He worked day and night, forgetting to eat or sleep. Every tiny detail was scrutinized over and over, all to maximize the crystal's potential and create a truly invincible vessel. After countless trials, just as Lin Shi predicted, Qing Zhou finally succeeded in crafting a bowl-shaped vessel, the treasure bowl. The moment it was finished, something unexpected happened. A brilliant, radiant golden light erupted from the treasure bowl. Qing Zhou was still basking in the joy of completing the highest-level vessel in the Federation's history. But before he could even test it, he was horrified to find his consciousness being sucked in by an incredibly powerful, irresistible force. In an instant, he was pulled inside the treasure bowl. At the same time, Lin Shi, who was sharing Qing Zhou's vision and senses, felt his world go dark. Their consciousnesses plunged into an endless void. In that darkness, time seemed to stretch on forever. In a space so pitch black you couldn't see your own hand, time felt stagnant. The deep, infinite darkness surged like a tide, bringing an unprecedented sense of fear and helplessness. Lin Shi fell into a state of chaos, feeling only the surge of Qing Zhou's emotions rushing toward him. He saw nothing, heard nothing, and even his sense of smell was almost completely gone. This indescribable experience made Lin Shi feel his mental power growing at a staggering rate. Thanks to this miraculous connection, he could clearly sense the fluctuations in Qing Zhou's mind. At first, Qing Zhou was filled with shock and terror. Faced with this sudden turn of events, he didn't know what to do. As time passed, despair took over, and it seemed like all hope had crumbled. But eventually, in that endless darkness, Qing Zhou chose to accept reality. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps days, months, or even longer, Qing Zhou finally regained his mental senses after a day of torment. Qing Zhou used his mental power to sense the world around him, and Lin Shi could also perceive the situation outside. Lin Shi discovered that the treasure bowl had been placed inside an extremely thick metal chest, and someone was planning to take it through a spatial tunnel. This was also the first time Lin Shi had seen a spatial tunnel so clearly through mental power. He had never seen a spatial passage before, but his intuition told him that's what it was. It was an invisible vortex, not on the ground or in the air, but hidden deep within the sea. The surrounding seawater distorted strangely because of the vortex, yet it wasn't sucked in. The scene was so eerie that no one could look away. At the four corners of the vortex stood 4 identical devices. When someone activated the devices, the surrounding seawater was pushed back, and a vacuum energy shield appeared around the spatial passage. The others stepped into the energy shield one by one. The leader said to the man holding the treasure bowl, "Hurry up before Shang Zhao realizes the treasure bowl is gone. Get inside now." "Yes, sir." The man was about to enter the spatial passage when he was stopped. "You idiot. Strip first. Do you want to be shredded by spatial energy for carrying foreign objects through the passage?" These people were all wearing diving suits. Hearing that, the man stripped until he didn't have a stitch of clothing left. He then took the treasure bowl out of the chest. "Is this okay, Commander?" "Go. Then I'm going in." With a look of determination, the man holding the treasure bowl said his final words and dove straight into the spatial passage. The moment the treasure bowl entered the spatial passage, everything was plunged into darkness. Energy erupted violently from all sides, creating a terrifying wave of power. The pressure from all directions crushed the treasure bowl. The once exquisite and perfect vessel became rough and jagged under the relentless waves of energy. Finally, as the energy waves dissipated, light reappeared. By now, the treasure bowl had become the rugged, misshapen object Lin Shi had seen before. Back at the Lin family base, Qin Shuang arrived at Lin Shi's seclusion room to bring food to the demon king guarding the entrance. It had been 3 months since Lin Shi entered seclusion. He had stayed in seclusion for this long before, but as he grew stronger, he rarely did so anymore. This sudden, lengthy seclusion had everyone, including Qin Shuang, worried about him. Natural disasters were becoming more frequent. Recently, a volcanic eruption in the Central Pacific caused much of the surrounding ice to melt. The blizzards that were thought to have settled returned, sweeping across the entire territory of the Xia country. This sudden blizzard caused massive disruptions for the government base, especially for the primal beast breeding project, which hit rock bottom. Due to the extreme weather, they had to move the newborn primal beasts into already cramped underground bunkers to ensure their safety and health. Not only that, but the government's large-scale plan to cultivate edible mutant plants was also stalled by the prolonged blizzard. This undoubtedly caused a lot of trouble for the government, as they managed the base with the largest number of survivors in the world. The daily consumption of supplies and food there was staggering. However, compared to other nations, the situation in the Xia country was still much better. Many smaller bases, with their already limited food reserves, were pushed to the brink by this latest disaster and had no choice but to beg other bases for help. However, in such harsh living conditions, most bases could barely sustain themselves, let alone provide food aid. Consequently, most of these bases set their sights on the Xia country, which held the largest reserves of supplies and food. Several small bases originally located in Africa, which were previously not under the jurisdiction of the Li family base, suffered heavy damage to their infrastructure due to a sudden, violent earthquake. They targeted the nearby Li family base, hoping to join for shelter, but were flatly rejected. Driven to desperation, this group quietly moved into the territory of the Xia country. They quickly occupied several long-abandoned buildings in a northern city and established a massive stronghold. In a short time, they had attracted many bases from neighboring countries, causing their stronghold to grow increasingly powerful. Now, this emerging force posed a serious threat to the Xia country's government base. Furthermore, their unauthorized intrusion and settlement on Xia territory had exceeded the country's limit of tolerance. In recent days, government officials had been actively negotiating with the leader of this group. According to the latest intelligence Qin Shuang held, the enemy's attitude was incredibly stubborn and unyielding. They declared that if the Xia country could not provide enough supplies and food, they would fight to the end, refusing to retreat even if it meant mutual destruction. What infuriated people the most was the list of supplies this greedy group demanded. It was beyond belief. The prices were truly astronomical. For the past 2 days, Qi Qiaiyue had been very busy attending government meetings. After careful discussion and research, the government finally decided to use force, assembling a powerful army to expel these people. It was predictable that a fierce battle was about to break out. This time, Qin Yang would represent the Lin family base, sending a 1,000-man army to support the government. Before setting out, Qin Shuang gave the Demon King one last meal. She gently stroked the Demon King's fur and placed the prepared food on the ground. Looking at the Demon King, she instructed, "Demon King, if Lin Shi wakes up and looks for me, tell him I've gone out and will be back soon." The Demon King let out a low grunt to show he understood. In front of the headquarters, the Lin family banners fluttered in the wind. A 1,000-man army stood in neat formation, flanked by vehicles loaded with all sorts of vital supplies. Everything was ready, just waiting for Qin Yang's order. Qin Shuang rode a primal beast to the front of the ranks and shouted, "All units, hear my command. Advance north with me." At the same time, outside the government base, 10,000 evolved humans were ready for battle, forming a massive army. They wore matching military uniforms, clutching their weapons as they marched with determination toward the north. The two armies met on the outskirts of the southern province and continued their northward advance together. After 3 days of marching, they finally arrived before the enemy stronghold. A majestic voice echoed from the government base's loudspeakers. "Listen up, enemies inside. You have illegally trespassed upon our territory. Retreat immediately or face the consequences." The roar was like thunder, striking fear into the hearts of the base leaders within the stronghold. "What do we do? The Xia army is actually attacking. What are you panicking for? We have so many people. Can they really kill us all? Go see how many they have. There are over 10,000 of them. We have more than that. Boss, should we fight?" "Fight? Fight what? Those are 10,000 elite soldiers. Go out there and tell them we're just staying here temporarily. Tell them we'll leave once the disaster passes." These minor base leaders were all as timid as mice, so terrified of death they didn't dare step a foot out of their fortifications. Before long, someone went out to deliver the message on behalf of the leaders. "Friends of the Xia country, you have a saying, is it not a joy to have friends come from afar? Another says we should sweep the floors and prepare the beds to welcome guests. We mean no harm. We just want to borrow this path for a while. We definitely won't advance any further south. Please, just go back." But this explanation didn't move the Xia army at all. Since this operation was led by Wang Chao himself, he had absolutely no intention of showing mercy to those who had caused trouble at the government base before. Wang Chao replied sternly, "You know the saying about friends from afar, but do you know this one? Those who offend the Xia country shall be executed, no matter how far away they are. I am officially issuing an ultimatum. If you retreat from Xia territory immediately, our army will help you transport your luggage. But if you persist, don't blame us for using other means to drive you out." Seeing his hardened stance, the messenger hurried back to report. "Boss, what do we do? The Xia army won't leave. They said they'll kill us if we don't go." Fine, fine, fine. Since they won't give us a way out, we'll put our lives on the line. Go back out and tell them we'll retreat. Let them in. You gather the soldiers. Use the stronghold as cover. Once they scatter, we'll launch a surprise attack. Yes, boss. Outside the stronghold, Qin Yang approached Wang Chao. Using her mental powers, she had scouted the enemy's plan and reported back. They're planning to feign a retreat and ambush us once we enter the stronghold. Wang Chao looked at Qin Shuang with gratitude and sneered. They have no idea we have a level 6 powerhouse who can see their every move with mental power. What do you plan to do? Since they want to hide, I'll beat them at their own game. There are too many of them, and most are just ordinary survivors. We can't kill them all. We just need to cut off the head of the snake, and their forces will collapse on their own. Wang Chao turned and gave orders to the officers behind him. Before long, the messenger from the opposite stronghold returned to report to the leader. Boss, they agreed. They're only sending about 1,000 people in to help move the supplies. Their leader is a woman, and she wants to meet you. A woman? Isn't she their deputy leader? Perfect. Listen up, everyone. When you hear me clap 3 times, that's the signal. I'll distract them first. When you hear the signal, strike immediately. The leader rubbed his hands in excitement. He had no idea that every word and action was being monitored by Qin Shuang. Since those 1,000 people were led by Qin Shuang herself, the leader naturally came out to meet her when the Lin family troops entered the stronghold. Seeing how beautiful Qin Shuang was, the leader's face filled with greed. He was about to say a few pleasantries, but Qin Shuang didn't waste a second. As soon as she saw his face, she drew her dagger and plunged it straight into his forehead. The leader collapsed, and the hidden soldiers immediately fell into chaos. Qin Shuang's troops moved swiftly, wiping them out. After that, it was simple. With the head of the snake gone, the remaining survivors surrendered. A few who tried to flee were intercepted outside by Wang Chao. The battle ended smoothly. Wang Chao led his troops into the stronghold. Looking at the majestic Qin Shuang, Wang Chao's eyes were filled with admiration. Amazing, he praised. Qin Shuang nodded slightly. It was just a disorganized mob. Afterward, they planned to wait for the survivors in the stronghold to pack their belongings, then immediately leave the territory of the Xia nation. The number of survivors was massive. It would take at least 10 days to evacuate all of them. The pursuing soldiers were jointly commanded by Wang Chao and Qin Shuang. Thank goodness you're here, Qin Shuang. Did we know each other in a past life? Wang Chao looked at her. In her previous life, Qin Shuang was Wang Chao's subordinate. How could they not recognize each other? Of course. You used to be my superior. Wang Chao laughed heartily. So we actually have that kind of connection. I'm really curious about my past life. Was I married? Did I have kids? Qin Shuang shook her head. No. You were too busy. Boss Lin even tried to set you up with someone, but you didn't even bother to meet her. Haha, that definitely sounds like me. I heard that being around the Lin family head helps you recall some past life memories, so I used to run over there a lot for a while. I did remember a few things, but not much. Come to think of it, we can be considered close acquaintances, right? Qin Shuang nodded. Wang Chao looked at her with bright eyes. What about you? Is there anyone you love? Although Qin Shuang was young, having 2 lifetimes of apocalyptic memories made her far more mature than her peers. She could see right through Wang Chao's intentions. Honestly, Wang Chao was outstanding in both looks and ability. But in her youth, she had met someone even more extraordinary. Young people shouldn't meet someone too exceptional. Otherwise, everyone else will just feel like a compromise. Qin Shuang had no romantic feelings for Wang Chao. Not in her past life, and not in this one either. I already have someone I love. Qin Shuang wanted to use this excuse to turn him down. Is it the Lin family head? Wang Chao blurted out. He immediately realized he had misspoken and quickly apologized. My bad, that was presumptuous of me. Qin Shuang smiled and shook her head. Actually, I don't really care much about romance. In her mind, she recalled that afternoon when she was humiliated by Wang Zuihua at the back door of the restaurant. That young man had stepped out of the sunlight and carried her away from hell. Even she wasn't sure if her feelings for Lin Shi were more out of gratitude or love. But it didn't matter, because Lin Shi couldn't love anyone anymore. The longer she stayed by his side, the better she understood him. She also understood why Lin Shi was never intimate with women. He was simply too strong. Not just in physical power, but his willpower was incredibly formidable. Lin Shi always knew exactly what he wanted. He didn't need women to provide emotional value, nor was his will swayed by personal desires. To call Lin Shi a human, he was actually more like a god. If one day Lin Shi wanted to find someone to carry on his bloodline, Qin Shuang thought it would be unimaginable. In truth, Qin Shuang's current life was already very fulfilling. Lin Rongshuan, Lin Mingjin, and Lin Siyuan all treated her like family. She couldn't ask for anything more. Or rather, the emotional void in her heart had already been filled by the people around Lin Shi. Vice Leader Wang, the leader here is dead, so I'll take my people back first, Qin Shuang said. Then, I wish you a safe journey. Wang Chao hesitated, wanting to say more. But until Qin Shuang turned and walked away, he didn't say another word. After crossing through the parallel space, Lin Shi closely followed Qing Zhou's senses, arriving together at Blue Star over 10,000 years ago. This place was truly an apocalyptic ice age. Bitter cold enveloped the entire world, leaving nothing but a vast, endless expanse of white between heaven and earth. Perhaps because it was their first time traversing parallel space, the altitude wasn't adjusted correctly, causing the person carrying the treasure bowl to free fall through the air. Upon crashing down, both of his legs were injured, making it impossible to stand. When Qing Zhou swept her spiritual power over this person's face, Lin Shi suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. A wild yet logical speculation flooded his mind. Ignoring the injuries to his legs, the man clutched the treasure bowl and said in a hoarse voice, "First generation, execute the release command." A second later, 3 round ancient coins suddenly materialized from the treasure bowl. Seeing this, the man went mad with joy. Just as the 3 ancient coins were placed side by side, Lin Shi noticed that one of them shone with a brilliant light, completely different from the other 2. The man immediately reached for that specific coin. In an instant, the treasure bowl radiated a blinding golden light. Right after, along with the 3 ancient coins, the treasure bowl vanished into the space between his eyebrows in the blink of an eye. Lin Shi's vision shifted along with it. Now, not only could he see the outside world through that man's eyes, but he could also sense the surroundings through Qing Zhou's spiritual power. But that wasn't what shocked Lin Shi the most. What truly astonished him was that the final host of the treasure bowl, after arriving at Blue Star, was actually this person, someone from the Sanlian continent. This completely contradicted what the old Taoist had said. The old Taoist had told Lin Shi that he was deceived by someone from the Sanlian continent into becoming the host of the treasure bowl, and was then tricked into leading all of humanity to the origin pillar to die. But he discovered that the person from the Sanlian continent never carried out that plot, and he even learned many secrets about the Sanlian continent from him. He even claimed that because he knew a Tier 9 treasure bowl host would have their consciousness replaced, he gave the treasure bowl to someone else while at Tier 8. There was a massive flaw in this story, but Lin Shi just hadn't thought of it at the time. That is, why didn't the person from the Sanlian continent who brought the treasure bowl to Blue Star use it himself? If he used the treasure bowl himself, wouldn't he be able to rule humanity better and drive them to the origin pillar? At this very moment, Lin Shi witnessed with his own eyes this person unlocking the treasure bowl. Lin Shi hadn't fully believed the old Taoist's words back then. Now he was absolutely certain. The old Taoist had lied to him. The old Taoist wasn't a native of Blue Star who was born after living for tens of thousands of years. He came from the Sanlian continent. Lin Shi confirmed that this person was the younger version of the old Taoist. No wonder he looked so familiar. Because this person's face was exactly that of the old Taoist in his youth. He first scouted his surroundings, then searched for tracks, eventually finding human footprints in one spot. He followed the footprints, but after walking for a while, he was frozen in the snow, shivering uncontrollably. The freezing air, combined with his naked, ordinary body, quickly turned him as stiff as a boiled shrimp. But fate seemed to always favor him. Just as the young Taoist was on the brink of death, an aboriginal wearing animal skins and exuding a primal aura quietly appeared. Seeing the ragged Taoist, he didn't hesitate to take off his animal skin coat and drape it over him. Then, he carried the Taoist on his back and walked steadily back to his tribe. Arriving at the tribe, the Taoist experienced the warm hospitality of these simple, kind-hearted natives. They brought precious animal skins and delicious beast meat, showing him care and concern. In that warm atmosphere, the young Taoist's body gradually recovered. Thanks to the thick, primal animal skins, the heat retention was excellent. Afterward, the Taoist utilized his superior spiritual power to quickly learn the tribe's language. Not only that, but he also used the profound knowledge he had accumulated on the Sanlian continent to patiently teach the villagers how to smelt metal from rocks, successfully forging the first copper weapons. Over a long period of living together, the Taoist gained a deep understanding of this small tribe. Thanks to eating origin beast meat, the Taoist's rank quickly rose to Tier 2. One day, the Taoist went hunting with the villagers. They hunted down a massive origin beast. To take down this beast, the tribe lost several people, and over a dozen were injured. Taking advantage of everyone's distraction, the Taoist placed his hand on the origin beast's corpse and secretly absorbed its origin power. In just a moment, his origin power broke through the Tier 3 threshold. Because the Taoist's spiritual power had already reached Tier 6, he didn't fall into a coma. In subsequent hunts, the Taoist grew stronger and stronger, while the men in the tribe grew weaker and weaker. This was because every time they hunted an origin beast, the Taoist would secretly drain its origin power. Lacking origin power, these ordinary natives either died from worsening injuries or perished from weakness during hunts. But the Taoist felt no pity for the people who had once saved him. Through this method, his rank rapidly surged to Tier 5. Lin Shi not only saw the outside world through the Taoist's eyes, but also sensed the surroundings through Qing Zhou's formidable spiritual power. He watched as the Taoist ruthlessly wiped out one tribe, then relentlessly moved on to attack another. Relying on the knowledge and skills learned from the Sanlian continent, the Taoist won the trust of those indigenous people and cleverly used them to hunt origin beasts. What was even more infuriating was that the Taoist also devoured the origin power from the dead natives to strengthen himself. Thus, thanks to the treasure bowl and his knowledge from the Sanlian continent, the Taoist smoothly advanced to Tier 7 in just a few decades. He also absorbed surrounding tribes, large and small, expanding the scale of his own tribe, to increase the origin power within the bodies of these natives, so they could be better sacrificed to the origin pillar. The Taoist even found ways to create methods that helped humans absorb origin matter more efficiently. He also taught these natives the meditation techniques of the Sanlian continent. Everything was going exactly as the Taoist expected. Recently, he had started brainwashing the tribe, preparing for the sacrifice to the origin pillar. However, the unexpected happened one day. On that day, the Taoist was leading his people to corner a high-tier origin beast on the ice. During the fierce battle, the thick ice suddenly cracked. The origin beast took the opportunity to fall into the water and escape. Seeing his prey about to slip away, the Taoist was unwilling to give up and jumped into the freezing sea to pursue it. But that very action triggered an unforeseen disaster. The once calm sea suddenly whipped up violent winds, and a massive whirlpool appeared right in front of him. The Taoist was unexpectedly sucked in and couldn't break free. Panic washed over his face as he desperately channeled all his strength to escape the vortex. However, the whirlpool didn't weaken. Instead, it grew even more violent, as if trying to swallow him whole. Just as he managed to break free from the whirlpool, a giant octopus suddenly surfaced from the ocean floor. It quickly used its powerful, agile tentacles to tightly constrict the Taoist who had just escaped the vortex. The Taoist didn't hesitate. Utilizing the full strength of a Tier 7 evolver, he used the weapon in his hand to sever the octopus's tentacles and escape the whirlpool. Having just returned from the brink of death to the surface of the ice, the Taoist immediately sensed something unusual in the surrounding air. The once gentle breeze had become unnaturally fierce. Just as the Taoist prepared to leave, the wind suddenly intensified, transforming into a massive tornado that blotted out the sky and swept toward him. In the blink of an eye, the world turned pitch black, and shattered ice flew everywhere. Before the Taoist could react, he was swept high into the air. Witnessing this terrifying scene from a first-person perspective, Lin Shi couldn't help but be stunned. To say this was all just a coincidence would be hard to believe. He immediately realized that this was very likely the will of Blue Star taking action. Who knows how long passed before the Taoist, covered in layers of injuries, was thrown onto the cliff of a steep mountain. His Tier 7 physique meant the superficial wounds were negligible, but the Taoist had no idea where the tornado had blown him or how far he was from the tribe he had conquered. Just as the Taoist was about to leave the cliff, a red bolt of lightning suddenly struck down from the sky. The lightning hit the Taoist, leaving him furious and his entire body charred black. At this point, anyone would realize something was wrong. The Taoist, panting with rage, looked around and roared, "Who is it? Who's ambushing me?" No one answered. After a while, the Taoist tried to leave again. But just as he descended a third of the way down the cliff, another red bolt of lightning struck. This time, the Taoist didn't even have time to speak before he plummeted from the sky, spitting fresh blood. Fortunately, he possessed the robust body of a Tier 7 evolver, so he didn't die. The Taoist endured his injuries and prepared to leave this godforsaken place. But the lightning bolts continued to pursue him, growing denser the further he ran. Even with his Tier 7 strength, the Taoist couldn't withstand it. Soon, he realized that the closer he was to the cliff, the fewer the lightning strikes. Finally, the Taoist returned to the top of the cliff, and sure enough, the lightning stopped. "This is the power of nature targeting me." Even though he had guessed it, covered in wounds, the Taoist still muttered in disbelief. After experiencing this series of clearly targeted attacks, even if he didn't want to believe it, he had to. The Taoist was forced to wait on this narrow mountain peak. Afterward, despite all his doubts, he tried every possible method, but as long as he left this peak, he would encounter all sorts of natural disasters. Finally, the Taoist understood that he absolutely could not leave this place. If he didn't wait, he would die. In despair, the Taoist could only use meditation and absorbing origin matter to kill the boring time. A long, agonizing 100 years passed by in a flash. The Taoist still couldn't leave the mountain peak. He seemed to have completely despaired. One day, the Taoist looked up at the sky, sighed, and said, "First generation, modify the command. Issue the origin pillar and survival war commands. Apply for the secondary key. Apply for the secondary encryption." Instantly, the treasure bowl and the 3 ancient coins flew out from between the Taoist's eyebrows, landing on the empty ground in front of him. The Taoist picked up the brightest ancient coin, used all his strength, and without hesitation, hurled it down from the towering peak. The ancient coin streaked across the sky like a shooting star before disappearing. Then, the Taoist picked up the remaining 2 ancient coins and threw them down the mountainside. Looking at the final treasure bowl in his hands, the Taoist sighed again. "So be it. I can't leave this place, so I'll let those natives complete the mission for me. One day, someone will pick up the treasure bowl and trigger the survival war mission. Then they'll trick all of humanity into sacrificing themselves to the origin pillar." The Taoist threw the treasure bowl down forcefully, and it too vanished from the mountain peak. Lin Shi, through Qin Zhou's spiritual senses, took one last look at the Taoist on the peak. Lin Shi knew that what he had just seen was the truth. To think the treasure bowl was unlocked so easily. This completely contradicted the Taoist's solemn vow that the only way to open the treasure bowl was to change its master. It turned out the old Taoist had been lying to Lin Shi this entire time. Lin Shi couldn't help but wonder why Qin Zhou hadn't reported this. Perhaps Qin Zhou had long understood Lin Shi's suspicious nature and deliberately let him discover the truth himself. After the Taoist threw the treasure bowl away, Lin Shi's vision immediately focused on the narrow area where it fell. Time flew by. Qin Zhou's spiritual power grew stronger by the day, and her observation range expanded as well. Unbeknownst to anyone, a mysterious small tribe quietly migrated to this land. Then one day, someone in the tribe accidentally discovered the treasure bowl. Coincidentally, this person also noticed an ancient artifact nearby. Thus, Lin Shi gained a completely new perspective. After awakening the treasure bowl, this person was like a fish in water, rapidly rising to power thanks to its ability to absorb matter and control its miraculous pocket space, showing off his talents within the tribe. From the remaining clues, Lin Shi guessed that the person who unlocked the treasure bowl was the ancestor of the Lin family. Unfortunately, this ancestor only held the treasure bowl for a short time. Because an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth, he was soon framed and murdered by others. After the ancestor passed away, the treasure bowl automatically detached from his corpse and fell into someone else's hands. The ancient artifact also went missing. It wasn't at all like the old Taoist had said, that the Lin family ancestor was killed by him upon reaching Tier 9. Honestly, if the ancestor had reached Tier 9, how could he be easily killed by a Tier 8? The old Taoist fabricated this lie with the obvious goal of stopping Lin Shi from advancing. Afterward, Lin Shi watched with his own eyes as the entire tribe gradually fell apart, unable to stop a sigh from escaping his lips. At the same time, the old Taoist standing on the distant cliff was also using his spiritual power to observe every change in the tribe. Perhaps the old Taoist thought a fated person would soon reopen the treasure bowl, but the truth was otherwise. He waited for over 10,000 years, even living through the Ice Age, yet still saw no one who could reactivate the treasure bowl. Time flowed like water, bringing unpredictable changes. 10,000 years felt like a dream. Thanks to his mental link with Qing Zhou, Lin Shi quietly sensed the minute changes in the flora, the fauna, and the tribes that possessed the treasure bowl over that long, endless period. Through the accumulation of time, his own spiritual power also grew increasingly stronger alongside Qing Zhou's growth. He began to understand that observation wasn't just about looking, but also about comprehending and understanding all things. By observing the lives, choices, and destinies of others, Lin Shi gradually absorbed wisdom and power. As time went on, Lin Shi's spiritual power became even more formidable. He felt as if he had touched the mysteries of this planet. No wonder Qing Zhou had previously said he could sense the will of Blue Star. Through this miraculous experience, Lin Shi also gradually sensed the will of Blue Star at different points in time. Simultaneously, Lin Shi felt Qing Zhou's immense spiritual power. From only being able to sense a range of a few hundred meters to being able to cover more than half the planet. It turned out Qing Zhou's consciousness had become this powerful without him even realizing it. If Qing Zhou had wanted to use the treasure bowl to seize Lin Shi's body, she probably would have succeeded right from the start. But Qing Zhou didn't do that. This was the sincerity Qing Zhou showed Lin Shi. Lin Shi opened his eyes in the seclusion room. His spiritual power, which had been bound like a sleeping eagle, suddenly awakened and spread its wings. It expanded like ocean waves, rolling out in all directions. After this experience, Lin Shi's spiritual power became even more condensed, and its coverage area was vastly larger than when he had first broken through to Tier 9. A line of text appeared on the treasure bowl's interface when Lin Shi woke up. 4 months and 3 days have passed. I used the treasure bowl to absorb origin power from the origin beast meat in the space to nourish your body. Feeling that his body wasn't emaciated despite lacking nutrition for so long, Lin Shi thanked Qing Zhou. Thank you. You're welcome. Lin Shi slowly stood up and pushed open the door of the seclusion room that had been closed for so long. The Demon King, who had been waiting outside, immediately rushed over with joy, clinging to Lin Shi and expressing its uncontrollable delight. After a moment of affection, the Demon King raised its head and let out a roar. A whoa! The roar echoed like thunder, resounding throughout the entire inner courtyard. Qin Shuang, Lin Mingjin, Lin Rongshuan, and the others in the distance immediately noticed it, realizing that Lin Shi had awakened. Without hesitation, everyone dropped what they were doing. They quickly ran toward Lin Shi. You're finally out. See you and missed you so much. Everyone surrounded Lin Shi, worry evident on their faces, their care for him overflowing. Seeing Lin Shi safe and sound, with his power increased, everyone was overjoyed, genuinely happy for him. Qin Shuang stepped forward and gave a detailed report of what had happened at the base and the government base during this time. Hearing that the natural disasters over the past 4 months had become even more brutal and on a larger scale than before, Lin Shi frowned slightly, his expression growing serious. After a moment of silence, Lin Shi announced his decision after experiencing 10,000 years in the dreamscape. I have decided to break through to Tier 9. Once I succeed, I will go to the Sanlian continent, Lin Shi said firmly. Go to the Sanlian continent. Lin Mingjin was shocked, worry flashing in his eyes. This is no simple matter. Have you thought this through? Lin Rongshuan also frowned, asking seriously. If you go to the Sanlian continent, How do you plan to come back? That place isn't our home. Qin Shuang pursed her lips and looked at Lin Shi, clearly very worried. Little Lin Siyuan clung tightly to the corner of Lin Shi's shirt, repeatedly saying, "Brother, I don't want you to go." At this moment, no one wanted Lin Shi to go to the Sanlian continent, because their worries were actually the exact same things Lin Shi had once worried about. Going to a completely unfamiliar place to carry out a risky operation with no guarantees was indeed too dangerous. If he hadn't experienced that bizarre journey in the dream, Lin Shi probably wouldn't have wanted to set foot on the Sanlian continent either. But thanks to that miraculous experience when entering the dream, Lin Shi had gathered a lot of information about the Sanlian continent. Combined with the intel previously collected from Ji Shui, Lin Shi now had a fairly comprehensive view of the current Sanlian continent. Lin Shi was confident he could return safely. As for whether he could destroy the spatial passage, Lin Shi wasn't absolutely certain, but heading to the Sanlian continent was already a step of no return. If the current situation continued, humanity would only have two outcomes. First, the people on Blue Star would have to bear the wrath of Blue Star's will, facing increasingly violent natural disasters and an ever harsher living environment, ultimately leading to extinction. Second, the Sanlian continent would continue to send people to Blue Star to plunder resources, and humanity would once again fall into the traps of those unpredictable people from the Sanlian continent. It was only after sensing the immense power of Blue Star's will in Qing Zhou's memories that Lin Shi made this decision. If Blue Star's will truly wanted to eradicate humanity, it was entirely capable of doing so. The reason it didn't wipe out all of humanity was that Blue Star's will had left humanity a way out, or rather, it had given Lin Shi a chance. If even Blue Star's will believed in him this much, what reason did he have to hesitate? Regardless, this was a decision that had to be made. "Don't worry, I won't do anything I'm not confident in." Lin Shi recounted the information he had gained from Qing Zhou's memories to everyone. "I have now mastered the language and writing of the Sanlian continent, and I fully understand its overall landscape. I've even grasped an incredibly valuable skill, the creation of vessels." Lin Shi didn't understand why the people of the Sanlian continent were studying the vessel creation data left behind by Qing Zhou. 10,000 years had passed, yet their vessel creation technology hadn't advanced at all. Instead, compared to the vessels created by Qing Zhou, these new vessel creation techniques were unbearably clumsy. Previously, Lin Shi couldn't see the pros and cons of those vessels. But after experiencing that dream and seeing things from Qing Zhou's perspective, it was as if he had personally learned how to create numerous vessels. His understanding of vessels had become incredibly profound. It was no exaggeration to say that if given the materials and tools to create vessels, he could even craft one with his own hands. It was just a pity that this world didn't have a barren planet for Lin Shi to experiment on. Hearing Lin Shi detail the situation on the Sanlian continent and the consequences of not going there to destroy the spatial passage, everyone understood that Lin Shi's trip to the Sanlian continent was inevitable. "For this trip, can you take people with you?" Qin Shuang looked at Lin Shi calmly, her eyes filled with unconcealed worry. "I will take Xia Chun with me. At most, I'll add Ji Shui. She holds a fairly high status on the Sanlian continent and will be useful when necessary. You all guard the Lin family and wait for my return." "Okay." Qin Shuang lowered her head and replied. Lin Shi left the Lin family base and headed toward the island with the origin pillar. Before he fell into the dream, the treasure bowl had upgraded and gained absolute space. With this absolute space, Lin Shi went directly to the island with the origin pillar this time and stored the second origin pillar right into his space. The island, the residence of the origin world, would no longer have anyone guarding it. All the Lin family members and the people at the government base were allowed to return. Right after, Lin Shi went to the high mountain where the old Taoist cultivated. He needed to settle a few scores, even if those things didn't have a major impact on him. When Lin Shi reached the top of that steep mountain, only the old Taoist was in the dilapidated Taoist temple. The fat Taoist and the little Taoist were nowhere to be found. As Lin Shi stepped onto the mountain, he left 2 clear footprints in the thick snow. "Why are you here? Have you reached Tier 9? The old Taoist, who was meditating in the temple, was extremely shocked when he saw Lin Shi. And terrified. That old, wrinkled face clearly displayed absolute shock and terror. Because the old Taoist's spiritual power had never sensed Lin Shi's presence. No, only my spiritual power has reached Tier 9, Lin Shi replied. Returning to the mountain this time, Lin Shi finally noticed that the origin matter here was significantly thinner than in other places. It was easy to understand why. Over so many years, the old Taoist strength had only gone from Tier 7 to Tier 8. After learning that the old Taoist was imprisoned here by the will of Blue Star, Lin Shi finally understood why, before the apocalypse, his repeated invitations for the old Taoist to come down the mountain were all rejected. Because as soon as the old Taoist left this place, he would immediately be attacked by the will of Blue Star. Lin Shi had seen through this scheme. I came here because I need your help with something. Come down the mountain with me. Lin Shi said. The old Taoist stroked his beard, narrowed his eyes, and said, I've told you many times, at my age, I care nothing for worldly affairs. My lifespan is nearing its end. To me, all things in this world are but fleeting clouds. Things you cannot do, I am not certain I can do either. Do not bother me anymore. Lin Shi sneered inwardly, but he wasn't in a rush to expose this hypocritical old man. My treasure bowl still can't be transferred. I think there might be a problem with my operating method, so I wanted you to guide me. The old Taoist slowly stood up, looking at Lin Shi, and motioned for him to come inside. Come in. Lin Shi went inside and sat down. The old Taoist then looked at him and said, The method I taught you last time definitely has no problems. If you don't mind the trouble, we can try practicing it again. Try transferring the treasure bowl here. Lin Shi remained silent, not answering immediately, looking hesitant. Seeing this, the old Taoist smiled bitterly and said, What's wrong? Are you afraid I'll trick you out of your treasure bowl? If I had that intention, I would have made a move the first time you came here. All right, give me your hand. Lin Shi nodded in agreement and signaled the old Taoist to extend his hand. The old Taoist slowly extended his wrinkled, withered hand, which looked like a chicken claw. Lin Shi placed his hand on the old Taoist's hand. The moment they made contact, Lin Shi used all his strength and suddenly struck. With a loud crack, the old Taoist's arm was snapped by Lin Shi. The old Taoist completely didn't expect this, but his reaction was very fast. He immediately used force to break free from Lin Shi and put some distance between them. What are you doing? Do you really think I want to steal your treasure bowl? The old Taoist forced down the excruciating pain in his arm, glaring at the scene before him. He saw Lin Shi pull a massive axe out of his space. The blade was as wide as a wheel, incredibly sharp, and gleaming with a cold light. Its terrifying power was obvious. Lin Shi gripped the axe handle tightly with both hands, gathering his strength. As Lin Shi's origin power circulated, the giant axe erupted with the sharpness of a Tier 8 origin weapon. That sharp sensation left the old Taoist with no doubt that a single swing of Lin Shi's axe was enough to cleave him in two. The old Taoist was terrified to the core and hastily shouted, Wait, don't attack. Let's talk this out slowly. At this moment, the old Taoist was unarmed, let alone possessing an origin weapon. Moreover, he was exhausted. He clearly knew that under the current circumstances, he was absolutely no match for Lin Shi. Facing a fully armed opponent going all out, he yelled, I suddenly remembered another way to unlock the treasure bowl. I'll tell you right now, and I won't ask you to transfer the treasure bowl to me anymore. The old Taoist still didn't understand where he had exposed a flaw to trigger Lin Shi's murderous intent. He naively thought that Lin Shi was only angry because of his request to transfer the treasure bowl. In reality, his lies had been seen through by Lin Shi from beginning to end. You don't go down the mountain because you can't go down the mountain, right? Lin Shi gripped the axe tightly, his entire body radiating an imposing aura, looking ready to strike at any moment. I don't go down the mountain because I've lived too long, my body is stiff, and I'm too lazy to move, the old Taoist replied calmly. In his heart, he was worried whether Lin Shi had discovered his trick, but his outward appearance showed nothing unusual. Lin Shi had no patience to drag this out, and said bluntly, If you want to suffer less, dying quickly is the best option. Just answer me obediently. Then Lin Shi asked his first question, What was your mission when you came to Blue Star from the Sanlian continent? As soon as he finished speaking, The old Taoist's eyes widened as if they were going to pop out of their sockets. He stared at Lin Shi in shock, unable to believe his identity had been exposed by the other party in a single sentence. The old Taoist wondered where he had gone wrong for his disguise to be seen through so easily. But even now, he still believed Lin Shi couldn't know many inside details. After all, regarding matters from 10,000 years ago, besides him, someone who had lived through countless vicissitudes and survived until now, who else would know? Therefore, the old Taoist tried to stay calm, pretending to be confused as he replied, "What nonsense are you talking about? I don't understand what you mean." Lin Shi smirked slightly, looking calmly at the old Taoist, and said slowly, "Actually, you don't have to answer me. You brought the treasure bowl to Blue Star to become the strongest, to rule the humans here, and force them to sacrifice to the origin pillar. Am I right?" The old Taoist's eyes widened, filled with shock and astonishment. But before the old Taoist could answer, Lin Shi continued his interrogation. "The second question is, who ordered you to carry out this mission?" Lin Shi only asked this as a formality. It wasn't Qing Zhou. So at that time, who else in the Federation headquarters had the authority to do this? It must have been the director of the Federation headquarters, right? He wanted to see if the Sanlian Continent's Federation headquarters was as rock-solid as he guessed, observing the old Taoist's reaction. Lin Shi knew he had guessed correctly. With Lin Shi's level of spiritual power, just by observing the slightest changes in his opponent's expressions, the dilation of their pupils, and even changes in their breathing and heartbeat, he could discern the crucial information he needed. Therefore, Lin Shi didn't necessarily need to hear the answer from the old Taoist. In response to Lin Shi's questions, which were as sharp as blades, the old Taoist's eyes widened again, full of disbelief. He stared intently at Lin Shi, as if he had seen a ghost, and muttered, "You? How do you know? Impossible. That's impossible." His voice was filled with terror and fear, clearly unable to fathom how Lin Shi understood the situation from 10,000 years ago so well. If he knew that Lin Shi had recently directly experienced the events that occurred over 10,000 years ago, he would have lost his mind right then and there. In short, Lin Shi's questions had overloaded the old Taoist's brain. The old Taoist clutched his head and shook it, his mouth continuously repeating, "Impossible." Even a powerful person like the old Taoist could never have imagined that within the treasure bowl Lin Shi inherited, there lived another consciousness that had also survived for over 10,000 years. That consciousness was the very creator of the treasure bowl. "You?" Finally, the old Taoist looked up at Lin Shi, only able to conclude, "You are also from the Sanlian continent." Lin Shi neither denied nor admitted it. He saw a line of text appear on the treasure bowl's interface, asking him if he knew the condition of her body when the treasure bowl was found. So, Lin Shi asked the old Taoist on Qing Zhou's behalf, "Before you came to Blue Star, did you know what happened to the creator of the treasure bowl, Qing Zhou?" "You mean? Qing Zhou, that scientist? Isn't he already dead?" The old Taoist's eyes looked vacant, as if he was recalling something. "I remember before the higher-ups obtained the treasure bowl, Qing Zhou was already dead. His body was taken away by Vice Director Qing Zhao. Could it be you, the treasure bowl?" The old Taoist's face was filled with panic, speaking incoherently as he looked at Lin Shi, as if he had guessed the truth. Lin Shi smiled. His arm moved slightly, and the sharp axe chopped straight toward the old Taoist. "That's right. Then go to hell." The old Taoist didn't resist at all. Amidst his terror and disbelief, a bloody line appeared across his face and body. A second later, blood splattered everywhere. The old Taoist was cleaved in two. An old monster who had lived for 10,000 years died just like that. Lin Shi retracted his axe, then used his mind to store the old Taoist's corpse into his space. The corpse of a Tier 8 cultivator contained a lot of origin power and still had its uses. Absolute space can bring items to the Sanlian continent, right? Lin Shi asked Qing Zhou in the treasure bowl. "Yes, but you cannot bring too much, lest you be attacked by spatial storms due to excessive energy during the reverse teleportation process. I advise you to only bring 1/10. 1/10. That's enough." The space inside the treasure bowl was vast. Even if it was only filled with 1/10 of its capacity, for Lin Shi, those resources were enough for him to survive for hundreds of years in a desolate place. But Lin Shi didn't just want to bring ordinary supplies. since he had the chance to bring things back to the Somnian continent. He naturally wanted to bring things containing a lot of origin power. For example, the corpses of powerful origin beasts, rare mutated plants, and even the Demon King. Just as Lin Shi was calculating, Qing Zhou seemed to see through his thoughts, and a line of text appeared on the treasure bowl's interface. I'm warning you in advance, because this is reverse teleportation, even absolute space will inevitably be affected to some extent. Furthermore, living creatures cannot be reverse teleported. If you don't want your precious origin beasts to be in danger, it's best not to bring them along. Qing Zhou's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over Lin Shi's head, shattering his plans. Lin Shi knew Qing Zhou wasn't wrong, so he could only sigh. Fine, then I won't bring them. Next, help me go on a slaughtering spree. Having dealt with the old Taoist, Lin Shi's next task was to slaughter origin beasts and stockpile high-tier origin beast corpses to absorb origin power. Before leaving Blue Star, Lin Shi wanted to upgrade his own strength to Tier 9. 6 months later, the Lin family base, which had been peaceful for so long, suddenly erupted with an earth-shattering force. Along with that powerful surge of energy, Lin Shi's body slowly levitated into midair, as if merging into one with heaven and earth. Endless origin power from heaven and earth surged toward him like a roaring waterfall. The immense pressure was so astonishing that, faced with this majestic, ocean-like wave of origin power, the surrounding space seemed unable to bear the massive pressure and began to ripple invisibly. The entire Lin family base was enveloped by this terrifying aura. The Tier 6 origin beasts that Lin Shi raised, as well as the origin beasts cared for by the Lin family members, were all terrified by this pressure, collapsing paralyzed to the ground, trembling uncontrollably. What's going on? Look up at the sky. That's the family head. The family head. The family head has broken through. Before the apocalypse, the family head was Tier 8. What tier has he broken through to now? Tier 9. It's Tier 9. Has the family head become a god? The family head is our god. Countless Lin family members ran out of their houses or other buildings, their eyes drawn to Lin Shi floating in midair. Feeling the imposing aura radiating from Lin Shi, many people revealed expressions of worship and fanaticism. Some even knelt down, bowing reverently toward Lin Shi. 100 miles away, at the official base, all the origin beasts kept by the officials seemed to be suppressed by an invisible force. These normally active beasts were now unusually quiet. Some suddenly became weak, as if all their strength had been drained. Others were paralyzed, collapsing to the ground, refusing to budge no matter how hard their trainers tried to guide them. Even the riding origin beasts that usually looked majestic and awe-inspiring had now lost their heroic bearing, clearly showing signs of sluggishness, completely devoid of their former terrifying presence. Beasts inherently possessed extremely sharp instincts, and their perception of powerful auras and potential danger far exceeded that of ordinary humans. Lin Shi's breakthrough terrified the origin beasts so much that they didn't dare to move. Ordinary people, on the other hand, didn't understand what was happening. They only felt a sudden shortness of breath, like experiencing low air pressure on a rainy day, and their heart rates were faster than usual. Only Lin Tianrui, Wang Chao, and a few others could truly feel the intense vibration of origin power. With Lin Shi, after a long period of being prioritized with resources and rapidly absorbing origin matter every day, Xia Chun, Lin Tianrui, and Wang Chao had all reached Tier 6. At this level, they clearly felt a trembling coming from the depths of their souls, radiating from the direction of the Lin family base. At that time, Lin Tianrui and Wang Chao were enthusiastically discussing important matters, with Xia Chun sitting nearby. Suddenly, as a terrifying wave of origin power washed over them, Lin Tianrui jumped to his feet. His gaze shot straight toward the distant Lin family base. This aura, could it be family head Lin Shi? Lin Tianrui's voice clearly revealed his shock and doubt. Without a doubt, it must be the family head. Family head Lin Shi has successfully broken through. Wang Chao was equally astonished, chiming in with disbelief. Tier 9. That historically distant realm was now manifesting right before their eyes. As the strongest people currently in the official base, they were confident that their Tier 6 strength was enough to look down on the world, unmatched by anyone. But after the fierce battle with Qin Shuang, who had reached Tier 7, not long ago, the three of them joining forces still couldn't defeat her. From then on, they deeply understood the disparity between tiers and the terrifying power of Tier 7. Now, family head Lin Shi had taken another step forward, reaching Tier 9. Just how powerful was he? It was simply beyond imagination. Family head Lin Shi has reached Tier 9, which means the plan to go to the Sanlian continent needs to be accelerated. Lin Tianrui and Wang Chao's eyes simultaneously turned to Xia Chun, who was sitting deep in thought. Lin Shi's breakthrough meant that Xia Chun was about to set off for the dangerous and unpredictable Sanlian continent. The future of this journey was unknown, and survival was uncertain. The worry in Lin Tianrui and Wang Chao's hearts wasn't fake. After all, Xia Chun was incredibly important to the official base. But a faint smile bloomed on Xia Chun's face. He had been looking forward to this day for a long time. Lin Shi opened his eyes, standing tall in midair. He felt the fierce power surging within his body, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Now, he stood at the pinnacle of this world. The next step was to head to the Sanlian continent. After reaching Tier 9, Lin Shi felt that his ability to manipulate objects had become as natural as moving his own arm. With just a slight thought, anything could instantly reach the position he desired, including himself. Lin Shi merely thought about it, and his body vanished from midair, appearing right down in the courtyard. The others looked at Lin Shi as if he were casting a teleportation spell. In reality, Lin Shi's speed and telekinetic control had reached their absolute limits. At the same time, the origin power within Lin Shi's body was so abundant that it regenerated endlessly. No matter how much origin power he used, it would be reabsorbed in the shortest amount of time. How is Tier 9? Is it strong? Lin Siyuan, who was now Tier 7, ran up to Lin Shi with a look of admiration. Yeah, very strong. If you cultivate hard, you'll also have a chance to reach Tier 9. Lin Shi patted Lin Siyuan's head. By now, Lin Siyuan was 10 years old, much taller than he was at the same time in his previous life. The higher the tier, the origin power required increased tenfold. Without support items, if Lin Siyuan wanted to reach Tier 9, it would take at least a few decades. But a few decades for a Tier 7 cultivator was just a small fraction of their lifespan. I will definitely be as strong as you, brother. Lin Siyuan clenched his fists, his face serious. Qi Yun, Qin Shuang, Lin Rongshuan, Lin Mingzhen, and Qi Xiaoya all gathered beside Lin Shi. On Qi Yun's face, which was usually carefree and unrestrained, there was now a rare look of concern. Cousin, have you really decided to leave? Lin Shi nodded slightly, his gaze looking toward the distant horizon. With his powerful spiritual perception, he detected that terrifying natural disasters were occurring in 4 different locations. What worried him more was that these disasters seemed to be approaching the base. Lin Shi understood that this was Blue Star's will urging him in a special way. After I leave, you all must guard the base carefully and wait for my return. Lin Shi seriously instructed Qi Yun and Qin Shuang. Lin Siyuan, standing to the side, couldn't help but get red-eyed, calling out softly. Qi Yun hastily patted his chest, swearing an ironclad oath. Don't worry, cousin. We will definitely hold the fort. As long as the people in the base are safe, we will protect this home no matter what and wait for your return. Whoa. The Demon King beside him also indicated that it would wait for Lin Shi's return. Sure, you must be careful. Whether the spatial passage is destroyed or not isn't important. You must return safely. Lin Tianrui patted Lin Shi's shoulder, letting him feel a fatherly love as heavy as a mountain. Lin Shi smiled brightly, comforting everyone. I know. No one values their life more than I do. All right, don't worry. Don't look like that. I will come back. Noticing that Xia Chun was approaching the Lin family base, Lin Shi said to a clan member, Leader Xia has arrived. Bring him in. Yes, family head. Before long, Xia Chun arrived in front of Lin Shi. Family head Lin. Everyone, follow me. You and Qin Shuang come here too. Demon King, go bring that woman here. Lin Shi led a few people into the seclusion room in the inner courtyard. The seclusion room before them now looked completely different from before. The once empty room now housed 2 brand new nutrition pods, neatly arranged. These nutrition pods were meticulously researched and manufactured by the State Scientific Research Institute, which had gone all out and invested massive resources. Even a vegetative person with no consciousness lying inside could continuously maintain basic vital signs and bodily functions. All that was needed was to periodically replace the nutrient solution. As for the power source, there were 3 backup systems: solar power, the electrical grid, and battery reserves. The electricity stored in the batteries alone was enough to keep the nutrition pods running for 50 years. The Demon King would be the main guard in charge of the seclusion room. Only Qin Shuang, Lin Rongshuan, and Lin Mingzhen were allowed to enter to replace the nutrient solution, ensuring that no unexpected incidents would occur. Not long after, Ji Shui was brought to the seclusion room by the Demon King. Lin Shi hadn't sought her out for so long that Ji Shui almost thought he had forgotten about her. Over the past few days, Ji Shui had constantly looked for ways to escape, but she quickly realized that the entire base was like an impenetrable fortress to her. Inside the base, there were all sorts of origin beasts taking turns standing guard 24/7, including but not limited to the Demon King, Little Silver, Hua Hua, Ji, and Tyrant. Even though her spiritual power was strong enough to charm ordinary origin beasts, she quickly realized that in this base, aside from her spiritual power being slightly superior, anyone could easily kill her. Every step she took was closely monitored. Coupled with the Demon King's sharp sense of smell and Lin Shi's spiritual power that covered the area almost day and night, Ji Shui had absolutely no chance to escape. "Where is this? Why did you bring me here?" Thrown to the ground by the Demon King, Ji Shui asked nervously. Lin Shi reached his hand out toward Xia Chun. Xia Chun took off the glasses on the bridge of his nose. These glasses were no longer the old vessel, but had been upgraded by Lin Shi. Previously, when he met Ji Shui, he had also obtained a mid-tier vessel, and he used it to upgrade Xia Chun's vessel, while simultaneously eliminating the consciousness entity inside it. This was the first time Lin Shi had personally modified a vessel, and the result was extremely successful. This vessel was now much sturdier than before. In addition to its 2 abilities of perfect camouflage and energy absorption, it had gained a new ability called transmission. It could lock onto another vessel to perform long-distance telepathic communication. Currently, this vessel only lacked a consciousness entity to become its artifact spirit. To reverse traverse space, if there was no vessel for protection, a consciousness entity would easily be destroyed by spatial energy. Lin Shi naturally couldn't just give Ji Shui a vessel simply to bring her back to the Sanlian continent. After all, once Ji Shui returned to her own body, she would cause trouble again. Therefore, after careful consideration and discussion with Xia Chun and Qin Zhou in the treasure bowl, they decided to use another method to bring Ji Shui through space. That was to separate Ji Shui's consciousness entity and put it into Xia Chun's vessel. This way, Ji Shui's consciousness entity could help Xia Chun share some of the damage during the reverse teleportation. Furthermore, the information Ji Shui possessed could help Xia Chun on the Sanlian continent, increasing his chances of survival. Even though Ji Shui wouldn't necessarily help Xia Chun wholeheartedly, with Xia Chun's intellect, Lin Shi believed he could distinguish useful information from Ji Shui. Lin Shi took Xia Chun's glasses and handed them to Ji Shui. "Put your consciousness into this vessel. If not, I'll kill you right now." Ji Shui looked at the vessel Lin Shi handed over and subconsciously shook her head. She was familiar with this vessel. It was a high-tier vessel she had brought to Blue Star. This vessel could perfectly disguise its user, a rare support item. Before coming to Blue Star, people could even use equipment to check if the owner of this vessel was still alive. Seeing this vessel, Ji Shui had another ominous premonition. Did the other group fail too? While Ji Shui was in a daze, a second later, a terrifying pressure and murderous intent from Lin Shi swept over her. The astonishing pressure of a Tier 9 powerhouse combined with Lin Shi's murderous intent felt like the wrath of heaven and earth. Lin Shi said coldly, "You only have one chance. Go in or die." Ji Shui's face turned pale, cold sweat pouring down her forehead. She knew Lin Shi wasn't joking. Under the threat of death, forced to choose between immediate death and losing her physical body, Ji Shui finally took the risk and decided to attach her consciousness to these glasses. Ji Shui was extremely familiar with attaching consciousness to a vessel. She took a deep breath, trying to calm down, then focused all her spiritual power on the vessel, skillfully controlling her consciousness entity to inch closer to it bit by bit. The moment Ji Shue's consciousness slowly detached from her body, the young girl's body, losing the support of her soul, went limp and collapsed to the ground. Lin Shi didn't hesitate. Grabbing the vessel, he immediately channeled his powerful spiritual power, instantly condensing it into a sharp blade and slashing down, decisively severing the majority of the spiritual power within Ji Shue's consciousness. Having finished the task, Lin Shi nodded in satisfaction, handed the glasses to Xia Chun, and said calmly, "All right." Xia Chun took a deep breath, slowly put the glasses on, and gave a slight nod to Lin Shi, signaling he was ready. The next step was crucial. Xia Chun needed to transfer his own consciousness into these glasses. Even though he had seen how Ji Shue did it, for Xia Chun, this was still his first time. Compared to Ji Shue, Xia Chun obviously couldn't easily transfer his consciousness entity out. Xia Chun furrowed his brows, his eyes shut tight, sweat constantly dripping down his forehead, as if he were going through a grueling battle. Lin Rongxuan stood by and watched, not helping Xia Chun wipe his sweat. As every second ticked by, everyone in the seclusion room focused their gaze on Xia Chun, waiting for his success. Finally, when Xia Chun relaxed his brows and his entire body slumped to the side, as if he had lost his soul, Lin Shi quickly stepped forward and caught him. He carefully poured origin power into Xia Chun's body to probe his current condition. The origin power within Xia Chun's body was still abundant and seemed unaffected, but there was absolutely no trace of fluctuation from Xia Chun's spiritual power.